Kentucky Derby extravaganza. We're going to talk about everything for the Saturday Churchill Downs Kentucky Derby undercard. We're talking about Saturday, September the 5th, and we are really going to break down that card for you. We're going to go race by race with 4 different guests talking all about the Kentucky Derby and different sections of the racing card. So first up, it's going to be Barry Spears going over races 1, 2, 3, and then his thoughts on the Derby. After that, it's going to be Ryan Dickey. He goes over races 4, 5, 6, and 7, and then he gives his thoughts on the Derby. Following that, it's going to be Craig Milkowski. He's going to go over races 8, 9, 10 with his thoughts on the Derby. And then after that, it is going to be Emily Gullikson. She's going to give her thoughts on races 11, 12, 13, and the Derby. So you're going to get 4 different opinions. We're going to go through every single race. I'm going to give you my thoughts on all the races. It is going to be a preview unlike any other that you will see, with tons of information, tons of different opinions, and it's not just who we like in each race. You're going to get all sorts of trip notes, ticket structure type things, speed figure information, and just a look at how different people handicap races, which I always love talking to different people about the races. We're also going to talk about the NBA. We have a nice interview with our buddy Erik, who discusses everything going on in the NBA right now. We go over a really intense Game 7 between Oklahoma City and Houston. We discuss the Game 7 between Utah and Denver, and then we move into round 2. Talk about the 2 Eastern Conference series where there are upsets of brewing, and then we preview the 2 Western Conference series. Can the LA teams be defeated? They're both going to be heavily favored in the matchups. Let's get right into the NBA. That's where we're going to start. We're going to start with the NBA because that's a little more time sensitive. We actually discuss some things that are going to be happening in Thursday's games and Friday, and then following the NBA interview, it'll be all the Derby stuff. And for those of you horse racing fans out there, it's another big week with our friends over at Stable Duel. Stable Duel with the daily horse racing contest. You can download the Stable Duel app. You can play in these contests for as little as $5, and sometimes bigger contests that are all the way up to $100. They've been tweaking the formats to see what the players like, all sorts of different things. So this week on Friday at Gulfstream Park, you can play for $5. There's a $5 buy-in. And at Del Mar, there is a 3-day Del Mar Derby. And it's a $25 buy-in each day with the guaranteed prizes for the pool. But there's also a bonus for the top 3 points getters. So you want to make sure that you're playing in all the contests over the weekend for Del Mar. So get involved. Del Mar Derby contest on Friday, Saturday, and Sunday. So you can also play in a regular Del Mar $10 buy-in on Friday. On Saturday, you can play at Charlestown. They have a $5 contest there. Normal $10 Del Mar contest. And then part 2 of that Del Mar Derby, that 3-day contest with the $25 buy-in. I'm going to be in all 3 of those. So you're going to have to do your best to get by. That's what G said. I had a good little few days, and then the last week or so, I've been struggling with my Stable Duel lineup. So I think it's time to get back in the money again. Sunday, Del Mar, day 3, $25 buy-in. Stable Duel, download that app, StableDuel.com for any of the information. And Stable Duel, what's really cool, if you go to StableDuel.com and you look at shop, they've got some excellent tees. They've got glasses, hats, funny slogans, and I've got a bunch of their t-shirts. They're really comfortable, and people always ask me about them. You get the size doesn't matter, but lengths do. You got the stay in your lane there, and the degenerate. A couple of really nice Stable Duel tees to check out. So Stable Duel contest all weekend long. If you ever have any questions about Stable Duel, just shoot me a message. I will help you on out. Just a week out from the NFL Thursday night next week. Game 1, the kickoff. And then next weekend, we have the first NFL weekend. So fantasy, it's going like crazy right now. Everyone's drafting when they're season long and getting involved. There is a really cool website called Thrive Fantasy that has all sorts of different daily contests for different sports. You can get in for as little as $1, $2. A lot of their big contests are generally in the $20 to $25 range with thousands in prizes, and it's built around prop betting. So it's a little different like some of the daily fantasy that you've played out there, but you build your lineup based on a series of overs or unders. If you're someone who bets a lot of props, or it's something that sounds interesting to you, you're going to get a little bonus. If you deposit 20 and you use the promo code Gino, you get an instant $20 bonus. So go check it out. You'll put $20 in, you'll immediately turn that 20 into 40. Hey, boom, you just doubled your money up. You can play around in a couple different contests. It is completely legit. I've played in a bunch of different ones. I've won a few. I always like to make sure that I can deposit my money fine. I play in a contest. I always like to win withdrawal before I'm ever going to bring something on the show to let you know, because first and foremost, I am a player. I like to check all these things out myself just to make sure. Thrive Fantasy, promo code Gino. You get $20 back in your pocket. I get a few bucks back in my pocket. It makes me look good to one of my sponsors. Help me out, and I'll help you out there with that 20. Thrive Fantasy, promo code Gino, deposit 20. Okay, here we go. NBA with Erik. Kick back and enjoy as we discuss everything going on in the NBA. And then following this about 45 minutes or so interview is going to be all the horse racing stuff. So if you're looking for all the horse racing stuff, it's going to be on the back end of the episode, and we'll have the time codes built in there for you where you can just move on around. If you're looking for Derby stuff, we wanted to put this stuff up first because this is a little more time sensitive. That way we can keep it all in order, since we're able to get this show out a couple days early prior to the Derby. So enjoy NBA talk. Oh, on the heels of a Game 7 in the NBA first round, a second Game 7, joining us is E-Toft 21 Sports, Erik, our good buddy. Erik, he talks really about everything in the world of sports with us. I know he's probably pumped that football's coming up soon, Erik, but we have had quite a first round in the NBA playoffs, quite a restart with the bubble. You and I talked a little bit before the playoffs started, and it has been really good basketball, and I'm like sweating right now. We had a couple really good games again today, and we had this Game 7, the last couple minutes, the last fourth quarter between Oklahoma City and Houston, back and forth. There's so much intensity between these two teams. There's so many storylines because these guys all know each other, and they've been back and forth and traded for each other, and this was a fun game to watch, and it was intense.
Oh my God, it was a great game. The last 2 days have been good. I mean, there's been a little controversy in the Heat Bucks game, but it's been a great product overall. You can't complain.
Yeah, and so this Game 7, I mean, the one thing that was really interesting about this group of players in particular, so we're talking about Chris Paul on the Thunder, we're talking about James Harden and Russell Westbrook on Houston on the Rockets. These are three players that are probably the three current best players active that don't have a ring. These are guys that have been really good and are perennial top players, MVP candidates, former MVPs, but they've all had, some playoff issues. They've never really been there. They've never made it, and they've never won. So it's interesting when you have a series with all three of them in there in particular, because they're all guys who kind of have the same thing they need to get off their back. They got to get there and win once.
Yeah, they need to get over that hump so their legacy takes that next step. And everyone always gave Harden a pass just because you could say, okay, the series against the Rockets, the series against the Warriors, Chris Paul was hurt. Mm-hmm. Those 7 games before, it's the Warriors, the super team. Mm-hmm. I mean, if he would have lost to the Thunder tonight, that would have been a huge hit on his legacy, especially with him playing as bad as he did. And
offensively, he was terrible.
Dort having 30 points. I mean, he was bad today. I read some stat. I mean, Dort was holding him less than, I think it was like 14% on threes and 13% on twos. I mean, he played awful.
And once he struggled early, he started to look passive, and that's what we see even with the best. And it happened with Chris Paul late. He had a turnover where he threw the ball away, and even the best that have been there, Chris Paul had some of the best clutch stats all year long. Late in games, he was the best. But tonight, it's a little bit different. We were recording right after this OKC Houston game, and it's different when it's Game 7 season on the line. We've seen these guys all get tight. It was funny. watching the last few minutes of the game, you know why Chris Paul, Westbrook, and Harden have all had some of their struggles when they've had to lead teams late, because all three of them had some mistakes late in this game.
Some bad mistakes. Some real, just like, what are you doing mistakes? I mean, it's just one of those things. And then I'm a big guy of coaching and like after timeout plays, and I've always been a Donovan guy. I really thought Donovan should have won Coach of the Year. Then after seeing the after timeout play design, what was that? I mean, like, there was just all movement was funneled into one, right into a crowd. I mean, the play design after the timeout made zero sense to me. Like, what are you doing?
Then when they go before Harden gets the block, you've got 2 timeouts left. This isn't normally. I'm fine with Chris Paul's got the ball in his hands. It's a little bit better sometimes to just go, because you don't let the defense get a chance to set up on you. You know, they're a little bit off, so you can catch them off guard. But he was going to slow the ball down all the way, sort of like he did anyways. You got 2 timeouts. You got to call a timeout. You got to make sure you get a great shot. And then what happens is at least leave yourself 5 or 6 seconds, because it's only a 1-point game. That way, if you miss, you can still extend the game, give yourself an opportunity to come back. When your season's on the line and you have 2 timeouts in the bank like that, just like you said, there were some coaching things here too that start to creep through, and we saw that this was not necessarily the best coached game late.
And I mean, Donovan did the same. Oh my God, I'm trying to space what game it was. It was early on in the series. The Rockets had a big run to start the fourth quarter. It may have been game 2, and he just sat on his timeouts. I never understand why these coaches sit on timeouts.
What are you going to do with them? They don't roll over for you? Use them.
I know. I understand you want them at the end of the game, but you don't get like bonus points. Like, use them, get something set, earn your paycheck, get a design going. I mean, it was just a real bad, mismanaged game by both D'Antoni and Donovan.
So we'll talk a little bit towards the end about now Houston moving on to play the Lakers in just a couple days. They'll be playing the Lakers on Friday in the next round. But and before we move on to really talking all about round 2, generally as a fan of my teams that I root for, Lakers, Dodgers, Rams, the LA teams, stuff like that, I feel bad when they lose, or for some of the players that stories of. But when I watch other sports and stuff, I generally don't feel bad when athletes lose in games, because they're athletes. They know what they're getting themselves into. They get paid a ton. I genuinely felt bad for Donovan Mitchell in this series.
Yeah.
This guy did everything he could to try to put Utah on his back and carry them. They were missing Conley early. Then they were missing Bogdanovich throughout, who would have just been such a huge help for them. And then they get up. He goes ballistic in game 1. The first playoff game that we had ends up going to overtime, and he scores 50. And then Murray and him have this duel, this rivalry where they go back and forth. This is a rivalry that's been all the way back to college, when they played against each other in college. And you felt, what a weird game 7 for them. It was sort of how most game 7s are. It was very tight. There wasn't a lot of scoring. It was like a rock fight, and it ends up being a 2-point game. But both of these games 7s were decided by 1 possession.
And I mean, I feel bad for Mitchell too. I thought he played great. But the one thing that stuck out to me in game 7 is, what the hell was Jamal Murray doing? Why are you pushing the ball down the floor after Harris got that steal?
I know.
I mean, a lot of people are giving Craig crap for going up for the layup, but when Murray passed him the ball, Craig had no other option. He was so deep. And honestly, in the NBA, there is no other person I want shooting a 3-throw than Jamal Murray.
I know.
That guy is so good from the 3-throw stripe.
Yeah.
I mean, the Nuggets were lucky to win that game. I honestly thought that shot by Conley was down.
Me too. And then they come back from, we don't see it often in any sport, a team coming back from a 3-1 deficit. And this was a series that just swung back and forth so many times. After game 1, you feel like, wow, you get this big performance from Donovan and they still can't win. So Utah probably is not going to be it. And then Utah comes back and they really kick the crap out of Denver a few games in a row. They beat them up. And then the series just flips, because all of a sudden Murray puts together a 3-game stretch that is literally comparable to any of the best 3-game stretches in the history of the playoffs in the NBA. And this is a guy who has always been good and a heat check guy, but he's not a 25 or 30 points a game guy even. This was just a whole nother level for Murray, and he carried them, to this win. He carried them. He gave them the opportunity to even get there. And we'll talk about it in a minute, I don't know if they have enough. The Clippers didn't play very well in round one, but I don't know if they're going to have enough when they move on. But
I mean, I will
was
give
impressed.
Mike Malone credit because he did make an adjustment. I've been hypercritical of him. Instead of running the offense through Joker, they ran it through Murray, and Murray came up, and they got Harris back, who just uplifts the defense. I mean, I'll give Malone credit because I always looked at him as a developmental coach, but he made some in-game series strategy moves that paid off for him.
No, he did, and we'll see now. Can someone in Game 7? What was key and what was clutch for the Nuggets too was when the focus started to get to. There were little moments too where the focus would get on Murray. They would double Murray, and you would see someone like Michael Porter Jr. step up and hit big shots. And he's a sort of an X factor because he can score, and offensively he is excellent. But we saw in this series, and we saw in some of the games in the bubble, that he is so bad on the defensive end that other teams will go right at him. They will attack him, and if he's not giving maximum effort on the defensive end, he's a real liability on the floor. So he's someone that you love to play as much as you can, but when he's out there, often he gets attacked.
Yeah, I mean, he's just bad. I mean, they're out there with Millsap. I mean, I think it was, what was it? I think it was Game 5. He stuck with him, though. Malone stuck with him, and he came up with some key, I wouldn't say great defensive plays, but he wasn't getting burnt, and he hit some key shots.
It's just an effort thing. He's got the size and the ability and the speed. It's just, how many of these players that too from dealing with players at a young age, when you're young and you're so much better than everybody else and you just score and outscore everyone, you don't learn a lot of the defensive fundamentals and just a lot of fundamentals, moving your feet, staying in front, don't reach, things like that. And we see even some of the best at the highest levels really lack some of the fundamentals.
They just get lazy. They just don't willing to put in the work. And
exactly.
Also, another thing maybe, and this is my problem with Joel Embiid, is he's just not in shape, so he lacks on the defensive end.
And it always shows up in the second half. It's the same thing. It's the first quarter, he dominates, and he comes out in the third quarter again, he plays pretty well, and then late, they start doubling him. There's about 2 or 3 times down the court he doesn't get the ball. He starts to get a little tired, and then he gets a little frustrated, and then you could see the way his body language is. He starts sulking. He wears it right on his face. You're absolutely right. And I mean, we can now move on from the Game 7s into round 2, and let's talk about 2 of the series in the East. The 2 series in the East so far, they've both started, and the 2 series in the West, they're both going to start. They still have not played either one yet. We were waiting because of the Game 7s. But we start with Toronto-Boston, and this one has been surprising to me. I mean, not that Boston is bad, but they're missing Hayward. They didn't feel as deep. Toronto, over the stretch in the bubble and leading into the bubble, I think they were something like 30-5 over the last 35 games. They just didn't lose. They were versatile. They had different guys showing up each and every night. It looked like without Kawhi, they didn't skip a beat. But this is where they really needed the Kawhi in these first couple games. When things got tight, when a couple of some of the role players who have maybe been a little inflated this year, when they struggle and they can't hit their threes, Kawhi's got the mid-range game. Kawhi's going to be able to go get you a bucket. And they haven't really been able to depend on Siakam for that.
I mean, when I'm looking at the series, it just comes down to a couple things. Number one, the Raptors averaged 27.8 points in fast break points, which was toward the top of the league. The Celtics only allowed 17.7 per game, which was 5th lowest in the league. Game 1, the Raptors only had 7 fast break points. Game 2, they only had 16. Their half-court set, they have nobody that can take anybody one-on-one. Everything's pick and roll or off a set plays, and that doesn't have space. That doesn't create space for one-on-one to create shots for somebody else. They have no one that can create for anybody else. And then Siakam, Boston's got 4 guys that can score 20 to 30 points. So Siakam can't really be hidden on defense. He's got to be engaged on someone. Have it be Tatum, Brown, Walker, Smart, whoever. I mean, any one of those guys is capable of scoring 20 to 30 in a game. So Siakam is spending more energy on defense, and now he's just tired out. I mean, out of everyone I've seen in the bubble, Boston right now in my power rankings is by far playing the best
Oh,
basketball.
absolutely. They've been incredible, and I hate saying it as a Laker fan and someone, but they are playing when predicting, the series and stuff before the playoffs and looking at them and giving how, everyone, if they play at their best level, this could happen. If they don't, that Boston really feels like the only team that's playing at their best level right now, while a lot of the other and I'd say maybe Miami, they're playing pretty well. A lot of the other top teams, even the Lakers, even the Clippers, definitely the Bucks, they didn't play that well. They got sort of lucky in the matchups that they had because they played very depleted teams. Boston has played great all throughout. And the one thing about Boston, too, is they've got some wings. They've got some versatility. They're very well coached. I just wonder, we keep watching. They keep playing well. Toronto, number one, they just didn't shoot well from three in either of these games. If they just shoot a little bit better, they win game two. And two, is somebody going to really be able to make Boston pay for the lack of size that they have?
I mean, that's in my notes. I really think they need to put Gasol in the high post and just totally run the offense through them, because Williams and Theus, they're the weak links in that defense.
And it's them two and Cantor. That's it.
Yeah.
You get one of those guys in foul trouble, that means you're going to need big minutes from Cantor, and then that's when you can really attack him on the defensive end. Because if you have Cantor and then Kemba in the game, then that Boston defense that's very, very good when they can hide Kemba in certain spots, that's when you can look at them and go, okay, now there's two defensive liabilities out here. We can go at them. So, yeah, they're a good team. They're well coached. And when Tatum continues to progress like this, he is there's pressure on him because there's no Hayward around. He needs to be this guy scoring 30 for them to keep winning these games, but he keeps doing it.
I think mentally wise, it's actually better that Hayward's not there, because then he's not looking over his shoulder. He has no pressure in the world.
He just goes.
I think Hayward, unfortunately getting hurt and having the kid born, I think that's kind of give Tatum hey, I don't have to worry about this guy over my shoulder who could come in and take my minutes, take my shots. He's got freedom just to be him, which I think is great for him.
And this team wasn't. You're right. There's really. He's got the pressure, I think, on himself and just to be the guy for the team, but there's no pressure on him and them winning right now. They're really not. They're not supposed to be in this situation where they're looking like the best team in basketball right now, and so it's icing on the cake. Everything that comes from here, they're not going to stop playing, but they're very happy about where they are. And it's different than when you're a team. I don't like the Lakers, the Clippers, or the Bucks, where there's a little bit of pressure on you getting there. At least you're supposed to be there. And if you don't get there, everybody's going to raise some eyebrows. Boston is just playing some damn good basketball right now. Game 3 is obviously going to be really huge.
And they're shooting well too.
Yeah, they're shooting. They're just Williams is giving them good minutes, like you said. I think they just need to get. Toronto has to use their versatility a little bit more. Like you said, they're kind of forcing it through the guards and trying to force it in through the wings, and that's where Boston is good.
Yep.
You got to go down low and attack them down low.
Yep, exactly. You got to get Gasol. You got to facilitate everything through him.
So Toronto is down 2-0 in this Boston series with 2-3. Got to think this game 3 is huge. Have to imagine Toronto is going to come out really, really firing and try to get this one back, because going down 3-0, they would be in some trouble. Let's stay over in the East and another team who's playing really, really good. And it was hard to get a feel for how good Miami was playing, because in round 1, they played against an Indiana Pacers team who just didn't really have enough. They were missing Sabonis. Oladipo was still kind of banged up. He wasn't quite himself. And they just weren't really deep enough to compete with Miami. So it was hard for me to get a feel for them. But they've showed they're not scared of the Bucks. This team isn't. They're very well balanced. I like the build of this team. They have a good chemistry to them. They shoot the ball well. They play good defense. They have a couple different guys that can get them a big shot late and can close, maybe Dragic, but Jimmy Butler we know can do that. They play some D. I liked a lot of things about this team.
I mean, basketball is all about matchups, and with the way the Bucks play about crashing and protecting the lane, they just leave the 3-point. They give you the 3-pointers. And Miami, like you said, they can shoot the ball. They have no real weakness in their rotation. And Butler, part of being, like you said, a good team is putting pieces around your superstar.
Mm-hmm.
The pieces they have around Butler are perfect. Butler struggled in Minnesota and struggled in Philadelphia because he had those guys who are quote unquote top guys coming out: Towns, Embiid, Simmons, and Wiggins. Now he's got these young guys who've always been told like they weren't good enough and need to work harder. Nunn, Duncan Robinson, Hero.
Yep.
And then you throw in Dragic, who I feel is one of the most underrated guys in the game.
Absolutely. I wanted the Lakers to get him. You know, there were like talks because nobody knew what Miami was going to do, and then they got Butler, and they weren't sure. And I thought people talked about him being someone that was, you know, maybe up for grabs. He is. People forget how good he is and how late in the game he can just go get to the rack, get you a bucket, just make a play.
And not turn the ball over, make a smart decision. I mean, you watched that game it was earlier today. I mean, anytime the Bucks were making a run, there'd be just a ridiculous turnover. A turnover that championship teams don't make.
Yep.
And then you have someone like Goran in the backcourt. He's not going to make a silly mistake. He's going to play poised and under control. And you get someone like Bledsoe, or even Giannis sometimes. Their bodies are going faster than their mind is working, and it's just a silly mistake. And I mean, the end of the game was wild. I mean, I didn't think that it was a foul on him on the Middleton three, and I didn't think it was a foul on Giannis at the end. But
no,
I mean,
that's hard to call at that point too. We see a lot of that. They rarely make that call, which I was surprised they did.
I mean, on both players. Like, I didn't think it was a foul on Goran. I mean, it was just a funky thing. But I mean, the Heat are shooting great, and it's the same thing that happened last year against the Raptors. Bucks give you the threes because they don't want anyone to crash in, and if you make them, you're gonna beat them. And last year the Raptors got hot. This year, like, the Heat are hot.
That's what's so funny about how good the Bucks were for a lot of this year, because and some of it has to do with the regular season and how people and how the intensity turns up and changes once the playoff time comes. But they were there's a template to beat them. They're going to be a good team always, because most times there's nobody on the floor that can guard Giannis. And if you don't have a good coaching staff and a good scheme, and it's different in a series too, right? When you catch Giannis on one night and you just come in from playing like the Spurs, and then the next night you catch Giannis and he's flying by you with that size and speed, you're caught off guard. But when you catch him 7 games in a row and you get a little bit used to it, that's when you can start to build. And that's where he's a superstar and one of the absolute best, but he still has a lot to prove as far as his free throws and his shooting. He becomes a little bit more defendable than someone like, you know, look at the Lakers, look at the Clippers, like a Kawhi, look at a LeBron who can stretch out and hit the three, or a Davis who can do that. Look at, you know, any of the players who can, Harden obviously, who can go inside, outside. With Giannis, he still has to prove that when things get tight.
I mean, my thing with Giannis, and like I tweeted this out way back when in the Raptors series last year, everyone said the three-pointer. I always said the free throws. He's so big and so physical. He's going to get hacked. He's going to go to the line. And I could be off here because I wasn't that old when Shaq was playing, but I remember Shaq in crunch time, he would make his free throws.
All of them. He used to say it. When the game is on the line, I'll make the free throws. He would say it. He was the quote, and he did.
And I mean, he shot 50%, and he would make them in clutch time.
He did.
So that's the one thing. Like, he needs to get in there. And granted, tonight he was 6 for 8, but he needs to be consistent over time with him.
That needs to be double digits every night for him.
Yeah.
Because he's not a good enough 3-point shooter for it not to be. Like, he has to be attacking you all the time, because there's nobody, even when you're scheming him and doubling and tripling him, you're still going to be off balance, and he's still so big and strong and quick, he's going to get by you. But it reminds me a lot of how LeBron gets late in games sometimes, because what ends up happening is they have a game where they miss some free throws early, and then it gets in the early in the fourth quarter, and they go one, they get to the line, and then they go 1 for 2, and then they get to the line again and they go 0 for 2, and now they're 1 for 4, and then it starts to get in their head a little bit. Yeah. We're human. You can't not think about it a little bit, and you see sometimes LeBron, and now Giannis does this because he's not as good a free throw shooter either as some of the big stars are late in game, and they get a little self-conscious. Do I want to get fouled and go to the line again and have to shoot two? I've just been struggling there. Should I maybe just take this mid-range jumper or settle for a three? And yeah, that's just – he can work on it and work on it and work on it, but it has to be there in these big games when they need it, because the Bucks are only – the Lakers, like the Clippers could maybe have a game where Kawhi doesn't play well and the rest of their team shows up. The Heat can have – they've seen it. We can have games where Butler doesn't play well or one of their stars doesn't. That really can't happen for Milwaukee in the playoffs. If Giannis is not playing well, they just are not going to win.
And I mean, I really feel the shutdown, like they were playing at such a high level, and the time away has just ruined them mentally, just because they're like, they can't get it back.
Yeah.
And I mean, then they start overthinking, they start pressing.
Their defense isn't the same. It's just everything.
And part of me, like, I'm watching this game today, and I'm just like, the Heat are better constructed around Jimmy Butler than the Bucks are better constructed around Giannis, which kind of blows my mind and shows you, like, truly how good Pat Riley is at constructing a team. I mean, it's, as a Bucks guy, because I live close to Milwaukee, it is insanely frustrating. And I'm worried he's going to leave now.
And it's impressive for Miami, all of these, when you look down. I mean, you talk about Robinson and Nunn and all the contributions they've got from people this year that you probably wouldn't have penciled in. And then it's even, someone like Olynyk who's hitting a big shot for them late in the game. Again, you forget that he's even there. Jones Jr. steps in, and he has a little spurt where he helps him get a couple buckets and kind of keep him in the game. Or just like you said, when Milwaukee makes a run, he comes out of nowhere and sustains it. We thought about Milwaukee, everyone you look at the NBA would always talk about Milwaukee being a deep team, and all their numbers this year on and off, when Giannis was off the court, they were still excellent. They were really good even without him. But when you just look at roster for roster, and it's the Clippers, when they're healthy, they're right there. But when you're getting that from, a Nunn, a Robinson, a Jones Jr., and Olynyk, when you're getting something from them in addition to everybody else that you already know what you're going to get from an Adebayo, a Dragic, a Butler night in, night out, that is a deep, deep team.
And I mean, everyone focused on the trade for Iggy. I mean, Crowder came along in that trade, and he's been
great point.
He's put in 30 minutes, hustle plays, take charges. He knocked down 4 threes today. He can guard multiple positions. I mean, them picking up Crowder is pushing them further than Iggy ever is going to this season. I mean, with what he's able to do on the court.
Completely agree. You people focus on Iggy because he's the one that's been there and done it before. But Crowder for this team has done more. He really has. He was great down the stretch, even when Iggy wasn't playing, and still getting himself back into shape. And then after the season, the restart back up, he has just been good. You throw him at Giannis. He's versatile. He's a guy you want on your roster. He's one of those really nice, like 6th or 7th best players on your team that just does so much for you. And they're in some trouble right now.
Oh yeah, I'm legitimately worried. And
they're in some trouble.
The thing about Crowder is, and I mean, I think hypothetically, let's say Butler has a hard foul. He drives to the lane, has a hard foul. The next time down, if Middleton and Giannis go to the lane, Crowder's going to hit him. And I mean, you saw in the Mavericks-Clippers series, Mavericks don't have a guy like that because Luka was getting beat up. They had no one to like give a hard foul to Kawhi. I mean, that just little thing that Crowder is able to do is just huge. And I mean, he just brings so much to the table, and he's just really underlooked in my eyes.
And we move on now to the West. So yeah, in the East, both of the underdog teams are up 2-0 on the teams that people would have assumed Toronto and Milwaukee were probably going to be hooking up in the Eastern Conference Final. They are both in some trouble right now. We move to the West. Let's talk Lakers Houston first. The 1 seed Lakers, they didn't really play. It was hard to to judge them in what they were doing in the bubble because they clinched so early that all of their games were pretty meaningless. The last 6 or 7 games they played. So they were sort of trying things out, getting rotations, but all along they didn't shoot very well, and they still really haven't continued to shoot well. The one thing that's been nice for the Lakers all along, even the game that they lost in game one, they've been playing really well on the defensive end. And so even when they don't shoot well, the one thing that when you have combinations of Danny Green and KCP and Caruso, they're pretty solid defensively. They're going to at least give you good effort on that side of the ball. You pair them with AD and LeBron, and then you have, Dwight or JaVale in there sometimes. Kuzma's become a much better defender. So now the Lakers have, as a fan, I feel pretty confident that most nights I'm going to get a good defensive effort from them, and that's what we saw. It's hard to judge, right? They played a Portland team that was so gassed. They were tired. Nurkic was out of it. Vertebrae broken in the back of C.J. McCollum. Trent, you could just tell he was gassed. And then Lillard ends up getting hurt and missing, the last game and a half towards the end. He hurt his finger, and then he ends up, having to leave the bubble. So I think it's hard to use the series as a gauge for the Lakers other than I like how their defense played.
I mean, their defense played great. I mean, Portland, you hit on the head. They were gassed. They went through so much, but Portland never was a great, quote-unquote, defensive team.
No.
So, I mean, I really feel like when people are looking at this series, we always have a habit of getting caught up in the now instead of looking at the big picture. And big picture, Portland can't defend. I mean,
they weren't going to ever be able to match up.
Yeah, I didn't think the Lakers were in trouble at all in that series. I know, during the season, though, and I mean, you've watched more Lakers games than I have, the unorthodox lineups, tends what I've seen that the Lakers have struggled with. So, I mean, the small ball that the Rockets play could be interesting, but I mean, I just don't, I'm playing around with it in my head when I was watching the game, and I just really don't see who's going to guard AD
in a series 7 times.
Covington, you know what I mean?
7 times.
Just put him down low. Who's going to keep Howard and JaVale McGee off the boards?
Yeah.
I mean, there's just so much through a whole 7-game series. Yeah, the Rockets may win a game, maybe 2, but I mean, in my head, as I'm playing through it, I mean, I have this 5-1, 4-1 Lakers. I think the Lakers do need Kuzma to step up a little bit and be that other guy that can create and get people involved. But I just don't think the Rockets over a 7-game series are going to push them enough where they are in trouble.
Yeah, this is another one of those teams where in the middle of the season, they caught the Lakers a couple different times off guard where, they're so non-traditional and they shoot so many threes that they're always going to shoot themselves into a win or two. But they're going to shoot themselves out of a couple. And just like you said, I don't know how they stop AD over and over and over again. I just can't see it going on. And then in some of the lineups where they'll try to stretch the Lakers out a little bit, but AD isn't exactly slow. He can get out to the perimeter if he has to. Dwight, we'll see if Dwight and JaVale, how much and how they match up and who can win. Is Houston going to be able to win going smaller a little bit? Will the Lakers try to go bigger? I'm with you. I think it'll be fun. Houston will put up a good fight. They'll win a couple games. The AD thing is just a factor for me. I just can't see them slowing him down. And Westbrook, he played well tonight. He plays well generally against the Lakers. How healthy is he? What version of him are we going to get? We saw him lose a game or two for Houston in this series.
Yeah, game 6. I mean, he made 2 or 3 just awful passes down the stretch with some turnovers. Even today, he had a great take to the hole, and he missed a layup. I mean, there was he hasn't proven in clutch that he can be that guy to finish the game.
No,
like a Jimmy Butler has.
And I'm a little worried, with the Rockets, we're seeing, big contributions from Jeff Green, House, who's good. House has been solid, but McLemore, players who have really drifted around, and you can get hot and play good for stretches of a time, but I don't know when it gets a little tighter, you get deeper into the playoffs, these shots are bigger. Is Jeff Green going to be there every night for them when they need him? Can you count on that? That's the kind of thing I just don't. I do think you're going to have Harden win you a game or two, and you'll probably have Russ win you a game. So I think it's I probably think 4-2, I would say. And the one thing that might be, if I was playing this game or this series, looking at game one, are you going to get it where Houston is tired from going a long 7-game series where, they had to battle toward the very end and it was back and forth and this and that? Or, the Lakers have played like one game in the last 10 days.
I know. For me, betting-wise, and I do this in NHL playoffs too, if a team is coming off a very competitive series, like series that goes deep versus a team that has been resting, I'll take the team that's been engaged.
Me too. Especially game one. Game one. Maybe late, and that's where they could maybe catch him, because if the first half the Lakers are just a little sloppy going through the motions, because remember they had the situation where I think it was Tuesday they were going to play, and then they had the boycott. So there were a few extra days before the Lakers end up playing. I think their game got rescheduled for Saturday. So they end up playing on Saturday. They clinch on Saturday. Now they don't play again until Friday. So that's a lot of time with just one game. And we're talking about a team who, before this round of the playoffs, was not really playing in very meaningful games for a week or two. So, I think game one might be a game where I would not be shocked if Houston stole that game, because they're in the flow a little bit more than the Lakers are right now.
Yeah, they're more engaged. I mean, I have my book open right now, and I have 2 of them open, and there's no line yet for that game. So, okay. I mean, I'm definitely going to be looking at the Rockets in that game, but I just don't.
Overall,
long-term,
I agree. Series-wise,
yeah,
I can't see it. I think it's 6, 6 maybe 6. So, let's get to the final series to talk about Clippers and the Nuggets. So the 2 and the 3 in the West. And I will say, we talked about the Nuggets and how impressive Murray was. And what's nice for the Nuggets is they were able to get Gary Harris back, and that helps them just getting another body defensively to throw at a Kawhi or a Paul George or someone on one of the bodies on the Clippers. The Clippers did not play very well in round one, and they should play a lot better now, because they were one of the teams that had a lot of things going on in the bubble, a lot of players in and out. I think Shamit and Zubac at the beginning got there late. Trez went in and out. Lou Williams went in and out. Then Beverly got hurt. He missed a couple of games. That's a lot of players in their rotation that were back and forth in and out. So they didn't feel like they had a whole lot of flow. They I want to say got lucky. I still think they probably would have won the series no matter what. But when you don't have to worry about Porzingis, who gets thrown out of one game, and then he gets hurt and he misses the rest of the series, they didn't really have – Dallas had no shot, is the best way to put it.
I mean, Dallas legitimately, if Porzingis doesn't get thrown out in game one, I think they would have been up 3-1.
They might have been. They sure would. They really would have been. It could have been – They could have been ripe to be upset because of all those things. Are the Clippers a better team? Are they deeper? Absolutely. But other than Kawhi, they were not playing nearly at the level that they've earned a reputation of, because they're so deep and they're so good on paper.
And I mean, for me, I'm looking at this series, and maybe it's just me talking myself into it because I have the Nuggets' future. But I think this series is going to be more competitive than people do. Beverly
I sort of do too.
Isn't 100%, and he's the head of the snake on the defense. If he's not 100%, who's going to guard Murray? Who's going to get Murray off of his game?
And the key for me is Jokic.
Yeah,
the Clippers, size-wise, Zubac is fine. He's a very solid, serviceable big man, but he's not going to be able to really guard Jokic. And if you get him in a little foul trouble, it's Trez trying to guard Jokic, and he can just shoot right over you, pass right over you, and really orchestrate the offense if that's the case.
And the other thing is when Joker comes out, Zubac's going to have to go out and guard him. That's going to open up offensive rebounds for Grant, for Millsap, for Porter. I mean, I really think that Denver is athletic, and they have some guys that athletically can stay with the Clippers. If I'm alone, what I would do on the defensive end is I would just say, hey, Leonard's going to get his 35, and I'm fine with that. But anytime Paul George has the ball, I'm going to blitz him with whoever's guarding Reggie Jackson or Patrick Beverly. And I'm going to sit back and say, hey, if Reggie Jackson or Patrick Beverly beat
me,
me, I'm fine. Fine.
That's a great point. Because Kawhi is another one too, where he's become more of a facilitator. But Kawhi, he's like you said, if he gets his 30, 35, that's not going to hurt you as much as another guy who can have 15 assists and get everybody involved and really attack. Like Kawhi will just quietly hit those mid range. He'll hit some threes and he'll get his. But Paul George, we've seen when things get tight, when there's a little bit of pressure, he can curl up in a little bit of a ball. And I don't know if I trust Morris, who he took some cheap shots at Luka. He could get thrown out of a game at any point. Lou, their depth though, I mean, when they're able to bring in Lou, and if Trez is healthy, they can really throw many options at you. But I am in agreement with you in that I think when I look at this, the Jokic is the key. If he can dominate like we've seen him dominate in playoff series, this thing is going to go 6 or 7. If he struggles and he's not a difference maker in here, then the Clippers could probably get through this quickly.
But I just think he is so good. He is so in shape, unlike Embiid, where he's not going to get tired. You got Murray that's playing at an insane level. And they also got Gary Harris back. And Gary Harris is one of the most underrated two-way players in the game. He was the one who knocked the ball away from Mitchell, and Mitchell drove at the end of the game. He was the one that started that play on that fast break when Murray didn't pull the ball out. So that you can roll Murray, Grant, and Craig between George and Leonard. And, I mean, I would just double George and make him try to pass the ball and, see what happens. I mean, to me, that's the blueprint of beating the Clippers. Make Paul George facilitate, and then make the other guys, Beverly, even Morris, Jackson, make them make the shots. Make the other guys beat you. Because honestly, who else are you confident in scoring? Lou Williams? Yeah, I'll give you Lou Williams.
And it's hard late in games, because if you've got Lou in the game, that means you probably don't have a Shamet or a Beverly who is going to help you play better defense on Murray. So if Lou is in the game late and he's cooking on offense, that's fine. But you're going to be giving up a ton there defensively if Murray could go right at him and try to attack him.
Yeah, I mean, it's just such a good matchup for me. And I really feel like Rivers is a little overrated as a coach. I mean, I will give him credit. I thought in the Dallas series he made a great adjustment in Game 5 where he put Paul George on Luka. So that way George was engaged on the defensive end, and he gave him some early looks to kind of get him going for the next 2 games. But, I mean... It's
funny. He did one of his better jobs ever last year.
Yeah.
With that Clippers squad that wasn't really... They had Harris and Gallinari, for a little while, and before they didn't really have any big star, and they really played hard. It was nobody expected them to even make the playoffs, and they were sort of overachieve. But it seems like when he has the teams that are supposed to win... You would have expected him to do maybe a little bit more with Boston. Didn't really do a whole lot with the better Clippers, with a pretty good Clippers, CP3
with Jordan,
and Blake.
Greg, yeah.
Mm-hmm. So this is a big series for him. And I mean, we're all seeing, and especially me being in LA, the series that everybody was talking about at the very beginning of the year when these teams made the trades, when Kawhi decided that he was going to pick the Clippers over the Lakers, when Paul George came from OKC. Paul George shunned the Lakers too last year. So there's a ton between those two. The only thing that would, we're obviously we're getting ahead of ourselves just saying that if it were to happen, the only thing that would sort of take a little bit out of that if it were to happen was the fun part of that would be that every game would be in Staples, and that wouldn't be the case here.
I know, and the Lakers would have had a huge advantage.
A huge advantage. Hard advantage.
And I mean, you brought up, speaking of the bubble, it eliminates the travel, the hotel, and it's just basketball. So I really feel like when you have eliminated all the external stuff, like the travel and whatnot, the holes that these teams have are even more glaring, if that makes sense.
They are.
Everything's just sticking out more. You can see the hole.
You can't hide it.
That
when you go home, there's the energy. You get a little energy in Game 3, right? You get down 0-2, but then you go home, and there's that built-in momentum into the series where teams go back and forth always. You know that this is going to be a turning point, right? When they go here. And that's not the case. So
if the Bucks were home tonight at Pfizer, they totally would have won that game.
I agree completely.
With the energy in that stadium, they totally would have won that game. But they don't have it.
You could feel it in certain games where teams come back, or the way the shape of the game is, that if that was at one arena or the other, the home team would definitely have won that. And I felt that even with the game the Lakers lost to Portland, where they came all the way, they were down, they were getting crushed, then they came all the way back, they take a lead, and if that was at Staples and you come back from down like 15 and you take a lead and you're up 5 or 6, you win that game.
Staples would have been rocking.
You win that game. The energy picks you up. You don't get a little bit flat when you come back out after a timeout, and it doesn't feel as much like a pickup game where you're just kind of play. And some really good points. And
then the flip side of that, like if I'm on the Blazers and I come out of the timeout and Staples is rocking, that puts more perceived pressure on me to execute. So I mean, it affects that too.
Yep. So can you believe we're, as I said, we recorded this just on Wednesday night after the OKC Houston Game 7, and can you believe we are 1 week out from football?
I mean, it is absolutely insane. I had my first fantasy draft the other night. I mean, can't believe it's like right around the corner. And I mean, college football starts tomorrow with Southern Miss and South Alabama.
Yeah. So in a weird year, one that we will always remember, in a sad year, in a struggling year, in a tough year. But at this point, we're going to have in a week, we're going to be in a situation where we've got, baseball, basketball, and football and college football all going on at the same time. Which
you got hockey. You're going to have the second round of the U.S. Open tennis tournament.
The Derby's coming up this weekend. Yeah. You and I are talking basketball on the show that's going to be the Derby preview show, where I go through the whole Churchill card for Saturday, and the Oaks is on Friday. So just a ton going on in the world of sports. I look forward to calling on you to bring you back to talk a couple some weeks before the Sunday. We can preview the games each week and give some of the plays that we have.
Oh, sounds good. Anytime you need me, just let me know, man.
So let's give like a quick overall Eastern Conference. Both of the favorites are down 0-2. So give me your thoughts. What happens in the Boston-Toronto series? What happens in the Milwaukee-Miami series?
I think Celtics end up winning that series 4-1. I'll probably bet. I'm actually going to put it in right now. I'm going to take the Raptors -1 tomorrow. I think they win that game, and then the Celtics win the next two. I don't know. Maybe the homer in me. I mean, I know only 7% of the teams that go down 0-2 win it. It's just, I don't know. I mean, I really think Giannis is such a hard worker. He's going to battle back, and I think this is going to go 7, but I think the Heat are going to end up winning in Game 7.
Yeah, they're going to fire back a little bit. Milwaukee doesn't feel like they've played well yet. You're going to get a game or two where they play well and win. Mm-hmm. So, yeah, I think they'll both go long. I think I have a little more faith in Toronto than you. I actually think that one might go 7. But I will say, I've been against Boston quite a bit. This version of Tatum makes them a different team. He is one of the better players in the league when he's playing this way, and he plays both sides of the ball, and he has just been incredible. He really has. So I got to give it up to the Celtics. They've been so impressive so far. And then over in the West, do either of the lower seeded teams have the opportunity to upset the Lakers or the Clippers?
I mean, I think the Lakers 4-1. I think I could easily see the Nuggets beating the Clippers. I have not been impressed at all with the Clippers. And also the Nuggets basically just played 3 Game 7s in a row.
Yep.
And I really feel like Murray last year in Game 7 against Portland, he played an awful game. And he didn't play his best game yesterday. But I really feel like mentally wise, just getting over that hump is going to help that young kid more than anything. And I could see him and Joker and Porter gets hot in a game, and they make it. I think Denver's really I think Denver, like when I'm playing in my head, I think Denver could even give the Lakers a problem just because of Joker of Murray and Porter.
MPJ is a wild card.
Yeah.
These teams didn't really have to deal with him in the season when they matched up. So we can't really quite get a feel for how they're going to match up until we see a game or two out there, and if he is able to establish himself as a big part of this series. If he's just a sieve on the defensive end, and if Paul George or whoever he's matched up with is just able to go right at him and attack him, then I think
he's limited.
The Denver that we've seen in previous years without the addition of an MPJ, I don't think they could get by the Lakers or the Clippers. But if they have someone like him being that X factor, that's where this is a Denver team that we may not know.
And I mean, the longer it goes, I'm hearing that Will Barton may come back.
Yes.
So I mean, the longer it goes, then you add him, who's by far their best defender.
Another wing.
I mean, and you throw him with Grant, Harris, all the wings they have. I mean, they just have a bunch of athletic dudes, and that's just another team that has young guys built around their stars. It's just built great.
Erik, let the folks know, where can we follow you on social media? You do a great job out there on Twitter, on Instagram. You have a podcast that you put out sometime. You give out a bunch of different sports plays. You give out your thoughts, when you're watching big games and stuff. Really good follow.
You can follow me at eTalk21Sports on Twitter and Instagram. Like you said, I give out my bets for the day, my thoughts of what I'm thinking. I'm also going to put out a draft guide, I think, tomorrow, where I have my rankings of the guys and my sleepers, guys I like, guys I don't like. Since you and I are in a league together, feel free not to look at it.
I was going to say, I'm going to do a little segment, I think, just like a quick one, sort of like you are, where I just give a few thoughts here and there on some positions, but that always ends up happening. Some of my friends listen to it, and then they laugh, and they text me right after they pick the person and said, oh, yeah, you didn't want that person. You didn't want them, huh? I said, oh, yeah, thanks.
I know. The auction when I was in, everyone follows me on Instagram, and Twitter, they see all the Cam Akers love I have. And they're just driving up the price of Cam Akers in the auction draft. I'm
just to make you laugh.
Yeah, just to piss me off.
Oh, that's great, man. But I always appreciate it. It's been a lot of fun over the last year and a half or so, getting to know you really well. You helped me out so much with a lot of the content that we were able to crank out for all sorts of different sports, and I really appreciate it. And with football coming up, I'm going to be milking you a ton soon.
All right, sounds good, man.
Okay, buddy, you have a great night, and I know you're on the East Coast, so thanks for staying up so late with me.
Oh, no problem. Anytime, man.
Okay, folks, don't go anywhere. We'll be right back with plenty more on That's What G Said. Love talking sports with Erik, and you'll hear him plenty when we discuss NFL. He is a really sharp gambler and loves to play fantasy. You can hear when he talks. He likes to watch sports. He really knows what he's talking about. Great follow there, and we'll always appreciate his insight here on That's What G Said. Well, we move along from NBA into horse racing, and now it's going to be a long journey, starting with race number 1. We're going to kick things off at Churchill. 4 different guests coming up to go over the Churchill Downs card for Saturday, September the 5th. We kick it off with Barry Spears, and we're going to talk about races 1, 2, 3, and then his thoughts on the Kentucky Derby. Get those past performances out. We can follow along, starting with race number 1 on Saturday. Oh, it is the Kentucky Derby Extravaganza show, and we're not just going to cover the Kentucky Derby here. We'll have 4 different folks joining me and covering the Derby, giving some of their thoughts on the Derby. We're going to go through every race on the undercard, broken up into different little sections. The leadoff hitter joining me to talk about races 1, 2, 3, and then give some thoughts on the Derby. And Barry, what a weird freaking year when it's September. We're going to be talking about the Derby. There's the NBA playoffs going on. Baseball's going on. Football's getting ready, all in September. Just not your normal 2020, huh?
No, man. It's so bizarre, but it's fun. At least everything's back up and kind of going and trying to get into some normalcy. So even the Derby itself, like at Churchill, it's been raining the last couple of days in the morning.
Feels normal.
Yeah, a little bit.
Feels like Derby week, right? Right. So then we have just so much going on from Friday to Saturday with the Oaks, and then to all the undercard with the Derby, and we get a bunch of really cool stakes races on the undercard. You and I are going to talk about the first few. We don't have any stakes races to talk about, but we do have a couple interesting races, and like always, kicking off the card kicks off a lot of those early exotics. So let's jump right into it. Those of you following along, get your past performances out. We're looking at Churchill Downs. We're looking at Saturday, and it's Saturday, September the 5th. Let's go to race number 1. So the one thing you notice too, Barry, when you're looking over these couple days, Churchill really bumped the purses for a lot of the races, even the non-stakes races. We see allowance races and maiden special weights that are worth $100,000. And here's one that's an optional claiming race with the purse over $100,000.
Yeah, I noticed that. That's really big. I mean, it's just too bad, with COVID and everything, you couldn't get all the jockeys in place.
Mm-hmm.
But still, I anticipate some really good racing. I know yesterday, which was Wednesday, was very good. So
yep,
I expect it to continue.
Okay, let's get into this first. So we just have a short field right away, but I mean, you can make cases for any. There's not going to be any of these horses that are going to be a hopeless long shot in here by any means. I think when I look at small fields like this, a lot of time, immediately I'm going to look at, okay, how is this race going to shape up from a pace perspective? There's not really like need the lead speed types in here. Maybe the two inside horses you'd imagine are going to be close. Who are you looking to kick things off?
I landed on Home Base, the one.
Yep.
Just only because of a matter of consistency. Seems to be, fast enough to get to the lead here.
Mm-hmm.
From the rail is not, a bad thing. And the other horse I did take a look at, who is the morning line favorite, Seven Trumpets, but it's just been so wildly consistent that he just hasn't kind of evened out. He is dropping in class slightly, I guess, but I just felt that Home Base could be the controlling pace here. The mystery horse obviously would be the 4 Midnight Sands. I mean, he could be any kind. His time form ratings overseas were pretty good on that dirt track at Maidan. But I just expect that horse not to break as fast as the other two or the inside horses. And then Hog Creek Hustle, I just don't know what kind of is going on with that horse. He kind of runs well, but never wins.
And you know what? He needs a bigger field. It sounds funny, but because of his running style, he needs there to be a quicker pace. He needs there to be a lot going on up front so he can draw back and make his late rally. In a short field like this, I think he's going to be up against it. You sort of hit the nail on the head with the one Home Base. He just looks quick enough to be able to get the lead from the rail. There's not a lot of other speed. Sometimes I don't like the rail if it's a horse that kind of has an in-between running style where they don't have a ton of speed and they maybe want to sit, because then they end up getting sitting just off and then they get shuffled back. This might be a blessing in disguise kind of thing. They're probably looking at this going, okay, yeah, we have to get aggressive now. We've got the rail. We're probably the quickest anyways. Let's just get aggressive and try to open up early. So for me, it's Home Base that I will be starting with for sure. You also mentioned the total wild card, Midnight Sands. Going back and watching a couple of his races too, it's so hard to figure how this horse and these races will stack up with a sprint race in the U.S. here. And so he's a wild card. I wouldn't talking you off using him in a few spots. Maybe Bourbon Resolution. If you excuse the grass race and you look back, the race at Keeneland, the race at Churchill prior to that aren't bad, and he might be able to fall into a spot. He might just be sitting behind the one, and if the 2 tries to press the 1, the Bourbon Resolution could kind of fall into the spot there. But I think we're both kind of in agreement that Home Base is probably the one they're going to have to catch here.
Yep, absolutely. Yeah. I mean, Bourbon Resolution is a pretty good horse. I just don't think he's a sprint type.
Me neither. Even when we watch his longer races, he just looks like you got to kind of get into him and ride him a little bit to keep up. And I don't know if that's going to be good in a small field like this. So I'm with you. It's, a lot of times, as much as we're looking at who we like, we're also eliminating horses, at the same time, especially in a small field like this. We look at Hog Creek Hustle and go, yeah, it probably doesn't shape up for him all that well. You look at Like you said, Bourbon Resolution. I don't know if this is really the trip that he wants. Then we have the 4 who's sort of a wild card. The 2's been up and down. And by process elimination, you sort of get to the 1 who's just been the most consistent and probably gets the lead.
Right. And I always say this and people kind of look at me funny, but eliminating contenders or eliminating horses that can't win or you don't think can win is an underrated skill as far as handicapping.
Absolutely. It's a major skill for sure. Especially this day and age too, because so many of us play pick 4s and pick 5s and those kind of exotics that you have to be able to, you can't just go favorite every race all the way down. You have to be able to pick and choose races. Some races you got to take a stand and say, I don't like this horse. I don't like this group of horses, whatever it is. And we have to be a little bit more bold sometimes in our handicapping, and that's a really good point. And so small field, but it's still an interesting group to kick off the Saturday at Derby Day card at Churchill. Let's move on to race number 2. We've got a group of maiden special weights in here. They're going to go 6 furlongs. So who are some of the horses you look at to start with?
Well, I'll start with the horses that have run. I thought number 1, Thrill Ride, has every right to improve off of that trip at Gulfstream. Funny enough, I don't see too many Gulfstream to Churchill winners.
Yeah.
At least not first time out. So that kind of shied me away from that horse. Although, Ian Wilkes is very good, usually second time off the layoff. He's been training well. He looks the part out of Candy Ride. Probably would like to go longer, I would assume, even based off his first race. So at 5-2, probably around first, second favorite. I just didn't think I could land on a horse like that in a race like this. And if he does win, I would not be surprised at all.
Yeah.
And then the far outside horse, Kadri, definitely ran pretty good at Indiana in the mud. Seemed to kind of want to need a race there, and he's definitely another one that has every right to improve. Wasn't too quick out of the gate and made up some ground late, which is always positive for a younger type horse, a horse that doesn't have that much experience. But I ultimately landed on number 5, Idol, first time starter from.
I'm with you.
Baltus.
He just you got a feeling this horse is just. He's not coming over here for Del Mar for no reason, right?
Right. That's it. Kind of had that feeling, and the horses that have run don't look all that great.
No monsters.
No,
they don't scare you.
Yeah, nothing at all. Idol had a nice workout on August 13th from the gate at Del Mar, then shipped to Churchill and had one workout over the track that looked pretty good. He was 4 out of 36 that day. So I mean, he's bred well. I think he might be a little bit quicker than what his workouts look like. The wild card kind of could be Kennedy's Bow. He has some really, really fast workouts.
Yeah, he's showed some speed too. Yep.
I just, he has the look, at least on paper, as kind of a runoff, which could work against Idol in a way. Because you have those horses like Kadri and the inside horse Thrill Ride that could close into a speedy pace. But, hopefully Paco can get him settled behind a horse like Kennedy's Bow and get first run.
Yep, there's plenty to like about Idol. You mentioned the works, and I love when you see good works at different racetracks like that too. You work well at Del Mar, then you come over to Churchill and you work well. Baltus is super capable with first-time starters. The dam of this one was a 4-time winner and earned over $100,000. She produced 2 siblings, one winner that is a 4-time winner also and earned over $100,000. And you hit it. There are probably anyone in here really wouldn't shock me. And any of them, but none of them scare you at all. And this is a great spot for Idol to come in. And I think they probably look up at it and say, okay, we could stay and run at Del Mar, or we could come here and try to take a swing at this $97,000 purse, in a maiden special weight. And in the way that this race came up, it's really, some of these races come up super strong. This one isn't the deepest on paper. So, other horses that I would mention that you hit on a bunch of them. You did a great job getting through this race. The 4 Proud Veteran, you can probably excuse him for his debut because it was on a wet racetrack, and then he tried the turf, and he actually ran pretty well. It was he was fourth that day, but it was in a big field. He broke well. He was just behind horses on the inside. He angled around. He was in a battle for second, and so he was just outfinished. He wasn't far out of it. He's not. He wouldn't be a huge shock in here either. You mentioned Caudry, the 7, who was a good second in the debut, slow start. Really did feel, I think you described it well, like he needed a race. Slow start, in tight, shuffled, squeezed back. But he might have learned a lot out of that race. He was in between horses. He was always in tight. He weaved through traffic. It was a good race for a first-time starter in the mud, having to deal with a lot. So I have the 5 on top just like you do. And I would look to maybe 4 and 7 underneath the 5. You mentioned the 2, who I have to flop in at least 1 or 2 tickets, because if that horse broke on top and opened up a length, I'd get a little nervous at a price. That one could get a little scary.
Yeah, my thinking was that Proud Veteran, being out of Justin Phillip and hopefully getting a dry track, will gun it to the lead. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. So, the way I kind of built up the race in my head is that Kennedy's Bow and Proud Veteran might be up there dueling. And, if Paco can settle in right behind those guys and get that first run, it'd be a perfect trip. So that's what I'm hoping for.
We move from race number 2 to race number 3. This one is another maiden special. And when you look at this race just from a pure morning line standpoint, it's pretty fascinating because there's not one horse in here who's over 10-1, and the morning line favorite is the 6 Pit Boss, who is 4-1. So you have an entire field of horses that are between 4-1 and 10-1. And so you can, honestly, it's said a lot of the time, wide open race, good betting race. When you can make a case for anyone in the field, and it doesn't feel like any of them are going to really be hit too hard. Now, I wouldn't be shocked if the 6 gets bet, and the 4. There's a couple that you can look at and say they might get bet down a little, and 1 or 2 will float up. But in a 9-horse race, lots of ways to go.
Yeah, this is a really tough race. Like you said, everybody has a shot. To be honest, I didn't see anybody that was just so far gone that they couldn't win this race. Like, not one of these horses just looked so out of the question. That being said, a horse like Pit Boss is just not my cup of tea. It looks like, from his form, his race early on at Oakland was pretty decent, but it looks like he had his chances, and I just couldn't seal the deal. Even his last race at Ellis, I know he started in the 6th hole of 6 horses in that race, but he was in contention the whole time, didn't pass a horse really once he got out of the gate. I think he may be served best with a slight drop in class, or even with a field that's a little bit less competitive than this one. So,
sure.
It's somebody that probably will get bet. I don't really like him that much. The horse that really stuck out to me was the 2 Fastly. He ran okay in his debut, probably needed the experience, came back on the stretch out in the mud and ran pretty well. I like the improved speed figure. He Brett Calhoun is just training lights out lately. And if he gets a fast track, I don't think the horse really wants to be on the lead like he was at Ellis, but I think he'll sit a good trip from the rail.
Yeah, probably tracking maybe right behind the 1. Yeah,
right.
Yep.
Pit Boss beat him last time, but I still think this horse may have more upside, especially going this mile route again.
Yeah, that's a great point with Fastly in a really wide open race. I think he's got a ton of upside. Just like you said, the 4-1 Nation would be one I give a look to. He actually ran pretty well out in Southern California a couple times. And so, you go through his career and you look in his debut, he ran on the grass. You can kind of put a line right through it. Then he came back and he finished second in back-to-back starts at Del Mar. He took a shot at Santa Anita and he was a little slow. And then he went to the bench from October all the way to August. So if something went wrong, he changed barns. I'm completely okay with excusing that race in October. And then when he showed up again in August, it was at Indy. It was in the sloppy track. The horse that was up front was able to cruise that day. He probably needed the race, and now he's going to go stretch back out from 6 to a mile. There are some things to like about the 4 One Nation, who deserves another shot. He really deserves a shot going long on the main track. We've never seen him get the opportunity to do that, and I think that could fit him very well in here. I prefer him even to Pit Boss, just for the reason that you said. Pit Boss feels like one of those horses who I kind of call like a measuring stick horse. He's probably going to be third in here, and if nobody jumps up, he'll win. If nobody runs well, he'll just kind of fall into it. But if he ends up being 5-2 or 2-1 and gets bet a little bit more because people see he's probably the one that they'll have to beat, I would much rather use some of these horses that have upside. You built a great case for Fastly with the upside. One Nation is one to me. Even a horse like Dynacharge, who you can really look to. The maiden 75 race, sure, that was a little softer, and then he stepped back up. But now he's a gelding, and this is a competitive group, but there aren't any world beaters. It's competitive because they're all okay. There's nobody that's, again, it's not another terrifying race. And that's sort of what is cool about this card, the early part of the card at Churchill on Saturday, even moving into races 4, 5, 6, and 7, that I spoke about with Ryan. They're very competitive races, really, really competitive. Even, 1, 2, and 3, I don't know how many short price favorites we're going to see early on in the card here. So,
yeah. I mean, like a horse like Storm King is another one that I took a long look at, but the reason I chose Fastly over Storm King was because I think Storm King is going to get bet a little bit just from the connections.
And it's funny when you look at them on paper, it's just the fact that Fastly feels like he's one step ahead.
Right. One race.
He took the extra step already, got that race going a mile now, and like you said. Sometimes you go stretch out for the first time and you end up sort of on the lead, or the jockey gets aggressive, which I never mind. I always prefer an aggressive ride. But then when you look back and you say, okay, that probably isn't where they're going to be next time. They'll probably be sitting a little bit off. Fastly was sort of in my unders, but you definitely sold me a little bit more in a wide open race. I'm going to make sure to use Fastly in all of my exotics now because, Fastly is just much more sexy than Pit Boss. If you get a better price, I'd much.
Exactly what I was thinking.
Yeah. So race number 3 at Churchill, another fun one. Okay, so let's move from the early part of the card over to the Derby. So this year we're in September talking about the Kentucky Derby, but because of that, Barry, we know the horses a little bit better, and in particular, we know 'Tis the Law. And it's really hard to say anything bad about 'Tis the Law. If somebody is going to bet against 'Tis the Law, and I bet against short price horses, and I can understand why you do it. It's a gambling game. It's just hard to say a whole lot bad about him. He's just done everything that has been asked. He's been very good for a very long time. Think about all the horses who throughout the year have popped up and been good. Charlatan and Nadal and Maxfield from last year to this year, and then that Art Collector, and they're not around, and he's still hanging here at the top where he's been all along. He's just been really cool to watch.
Yeah, I mean, he's held his form all year, but you know what the funny thing is when people were talking about this Derby when it was moved to September, how much better the field would be, and it totally didn't shape up that way.
It went the
opposite way. I mean, a horse like Maxfield would be excellent in a field like this. To make it more competitive, this field, at least from my opinion, is not as strong.
It's not
as it probably would have been in May.
Yep. Well, because and think about it. Those next were like we saw, and in May we saw both Nadal and Charlatan run. Maxfield would have been real close because he came back and he ran after that. But could you imagine those horses would have been in the group of the top 5 betting choices? Those would have been like the next tier of horses: Nadal, Charlatan, and Maxfield. So you take them out, then you take Art Collector out. Those are like horses that would have been either right there along with Tiz the Law or 2, 3, 4, and 5 all out. Now it does feel like there's such a gap.
Yeah. And then now, as we're doing this, King Guillermo may be shaky for the race. So, that factors in as well, because he could have been somewhat of a pace presence,
especially with his
from
towards the inside. Yep,
right.
Yep. He would have been forced a little bit there, fresh inside. They would have been thinking, hey, we're not going to have an opportunity to come from 10 lengths out of it. We got to just go. So that would have been at least something that has a big impact on the race.
Yeah, especially with with really the contenders taking the last 4 spots.
Yep.
The 15 through the 18. That's a tough position, and all those horses have to get out of the gate. I mean, I'm not really too fond of New York Traffic, only because he doesn't pass. He gets, if he's on the lead, he's great. I mean, he's tough to pass himself, but he doesn't pass horses. I mean, anytime he's ever behind, he's never passed anybody. He'll stay right where he is the whole way around. Those races in Louisiana were kind of merry-go-round races anyway. And he was right in the thick of it and just didn't pass anybody. So I'm not real enamored with him, but he does have to get out of the gate. A horse like Honor AP, he's got to get out of the gate too. Tiz the Law needs positioning, and obviously Authentic, who is probably the biggest beneficiary of the Art Collector scratch, has to get around 17 other horses to get to the lead. I mean, if he doesn't get to the lead, I don't think he's going to be effective. He can take him a long way, given the pace dynamics, if he's allowed to slow it up a little bit. I'm not sure if he can seal the deal in a mile and a quarter, which brings me to the pick I have, which might surprise people a bit, but the rest of the field is so bad. It was like a pick of, by attrition. And I went to Money Moves. He drew well. He drew well. His last race, I looked at that race at Saratoga a real long time, and he probably should have won, to be honest. He didn't get out of the gate well, and he was coming really hard at the end. And with the horses that are in this race, his trip will probably be pretty good, because there's really no speed, especially if King Guillermo scratches. There's not much speed inside of him, and he can kind of go where he wants. I mean, Storm the Court gets out of the gate, but I wouldn't really think that he's going to be fast enough to be with the likes of, let's say, Authentic early. And if he does, it's just a suicide mission.
Yeah.
But Money Moves, there's a lot of upside there, and I didn't see that with a lot of these other horses. And being so late in the year, not saying that these 3-year-olds are established per se, but they, it's later in the year. They're developed.
Yeah, we feel like that's another good point, is that when the Derby's earlier, we have some horses who have just won one of the big prep races and sort of established themselves, or maybe one of these horses upset one of the big contenders because maybe that contender wasn't really cranked up because they didn't need the point. So we could start to have these storylines. There haven't been a whole ton of them other than Tiz the Law pretty much beating up on everybody. That's really been it. I mean, you can make the cases for Honor AP being, out on the West Coast and maybe not, and I think Honor AP is got a shot, will be in the couple that I use. But I like what you're doing with Money Moves, and Money Moves will be on all of my exotic, exacta, tri, super, everything I play multi in the race. I absolutely think if he takes one more step forward, he still might be, if Tiz the Law gets a good trip, he still might not be able to beat Tiz the Law. But I have no problem thinking he could beat everybody else in the field for sure with some improvement. So that means if a horse like Tiz the Law gets in trouble and a horse like Money Moves gets the good trip and works out that trip at that kind of a price, I like him so much more than some of the other horses in here.
Yeah, I'm just afraid he's going to get a lot of wise guy money, even though people were talking about, King Guillermo. If he stays in, he might get it. But now it's kind of, even if he does run, it's still going to be that question mark, and it's going to
there'll be the hesitation. He won't get a lot of money at all if he's in now. Yeah.
Right.
Because they've had, and I'm glad you mentioned it, because as we're recording, it was on Twitter for Byron King and reporter. We have a little problem. Trainer Juan Carlos Avila said we have to wait until the afternoon, and we're recording this early Thursday morning, so we'll find out a little bit more later, and make sure you keep checking everything leading up to, because we see this unfortunately every year too, is that all the pressure sort of leading up, these horses get in, their routine in the mornings, and it just happens in every sport, right? You're practicing and you just twist an ankle, something happens, and you're not stretched out, whatever it is, and there's always 2 or 3 horses right before at the end that have to scratch.
Yeah, and the other horse, obviously Tiz the Law is definitely going to be there. I don't see him, unless something goes crazy and he just doesn't run for whatever reason. I think he's going to be right in the thick of it. But 1,000 Words is a little forgotten, and I think he's going to sit a good trip also. So those are the 3 that I'm keying in on. But win bet, I'm gonna play Money Moves on top. So just in case something weird's happened, it's 2020, nothing's been normal,
right?
So hopefully that trend continues.
What are your plans going to be for this weekend? You just going to be hanging out at home watching the races?
Absolutely, I'm going to be barbecuing some ribs.
Nice.
And we're going to watch the races all day. That's what we do around here.
Awesome. Well, I look forward to going back and forth with you online, and I wish you the best of luck this weekend. I appreciate you carving out some time here for me and for the listeners of That's What G Said. And let the folks know, where can we find you on social media? Where can we follow you along?
You can follow me on Twitter at Urban Handicapper, URBN Handicapper, all day, every day. Hit me up.
Great follow. Love talking with you, man. Thank you so much, and have a great weekend.
All right. Thanks a lot for having me. It's been a pleasure.
Folks, don't go anywhere. We're just going to take a quick break. We'll be right back here with much more on That's What G Said. And a big thank you to Barry for helping us out with that first part of the card there at Churchill and some of the Derby thoughts. So just to recap for races 1, 2, and 3, in the opener, I like Home Base quite a bit. It might even be a horse I single in some of the early exotics, getting the lead from the inside. I would stack it 1, 3, 4 there. In the opener, in race 2, that maiden special weight race, I got the 5, Idol, the first timer, on top. We'll have the 4, Proud Veteran, and the 7, Caudry, as other horses to include underneath. The 2, maybe Kennedy's Bow, if you want to go a little bit deeper, would be another one. And then obviously, Thrill Ride is... How do you play the early exotics, right? And on a ticket where I single right off the bat, sure, I'll throw Thrill Ride in. But when there are favorites or short price horses that you don't love, and if you start using them in every race, that's where your tickets start getting bigger and bigger, and they don't get as good of a return on your investment as we would like. So 5, 4, 7 in particular, with a look at Idol. I'm sure this horse is going to get a little bit of money first click. And then in race number 3, I've got the 4, One Nation, with the 7, Dyna Charge, with the 2, Fastly, with the 6, Pit Boss, and then the 5, first timer, who has a couple sneaky works. The Dam was 1 for 6, has a couple winning siblings there. So I'll stack them 4, 7, 2, 6, 5 in race number 3. Horse racing fans, you have to take a look at oldsmokeclothing.com. There aren't a ton of places out there that have a bunch of different horse racing t-shirts, hats, zip-ups, hoodies, pullovers, all sorts of different stuff where you can really show the horse racing fan in you. Check out the website. I mean, if you're a fan of Tiz the Law, they have different shirts with different sayings, slogans, Tiz the Law trucker hat. If you're a fan of all sorts of different horses, different racetracks, horse racing slogans, you can do custom designs there at oldsmokeclothing.com, and get a little bonus just because you're listening to That's What G Said. If you use the promo code GINO, it'll get you free shipping on your purchase. So maybe your mom, your dad, your brother, your sister, your husband, your wife, one of your friends, they love horse racing. This is a really cool place where you can get them a gift. You can get them a couple different shirts, some hats, some things for a holiday, for a birthday. Stack them away. Use that promo code GINO. It'll get you free shipping. we continue along on our journey. Saturday, Churchill Downs. Up next, Ryan Dickey joins to talk races 4, 5, 6, and 7, and then he gives some of his thoughts on the Kentucky Derby. Kick back and enjoy as we move to a section of the card that has fields of 12, 12, 12, and 12. This is maybe the best betting section of all of Friday and Saturday. There's a ton of really good stakes races, a ton of big name stars. There's a lot of races with short price favorites in them in the stakes. But in the earlier part of the card, and especially this middle part, 4, 5, 6, and 7, you're going to be able to find a ton of 5, 10 to 1 shots that you like. Kick back and enjoy. Get those past performances out. Okay, we continue rolling along on this Saturday Churchill Downs Kentucky Derby undercard, and now the number 2 hitter in our batting lineup. I mean, I'm talking about all-time great 2 hitters. I don't know. I'm not really sure who jumps out to me as one of the all-time great 2 hitters. Oh yeah, Ryan Dickey. That's who. He's going to join me again. One of my favorite things of this show, Ryan, is, obviously I get to talk to a lot of get to give my opinion and interact with a lot of fans out there. But I also get to meet people like you who, I interacted with, but I never really talked to. And now we've had a few conversations and I've started to get to know you a little bit. I feel like you're a nice friend. And what are we going to do on a Saturday Derby day? We're going to talk about some races with some buddies. So you ready to talk races 4, 5, 6 and a little Derby?
Absolutely. It's really fun talking with you. I have a good time and it's a great show.
Okay, let's get right into it. So we were lucky enough to have a bunch of good guests help us out breaking down little chunks of the card throughout. So you and I are going to talk about races 4, 5, 6, 7, and then give some Derby thoughts. Let's get into race number 4. Man, we have a couple big fields and some good betting races. These aren't graded stakes, but if you're just looking for value and you're someone who likes to play 5, 8, 10 to 1 shots, you're going to find some in a couple of these races. So in the 4th, this maiden 2-year-old race, 6 furlongs, where do you start? Who are a couple of the horses that you would maybe need to use in some exotics?
Well, if I wanted to talk about the horses I'd want to use in the exotics, obviously I want to start with the 2 firsters for Brad Cox, the number 5, Essential Quality, and then the number 1 horse for Steve Asmussen, Big Lake. Although those are horses that I would need to use if I was playing any multi-race bets, I think the horse that is, for me, the value in this race would be the number 11, Rye Sense of Humor, and it's not because his name's Rye and my name's Rye. I really think that by looking at this field, it's a big field with 2-year-olds. Half the field are firsters. And the ones that have already started have mostly been forwardly placed. So this could be a frantic early pace. I think that what I want here is a young horse who can make up ground. And if you look at Rye Sense of Humor's first race for Wilkes, he got bumped early in his debut, but then he started making up ground. And even though it was a short race, he not only gained position-wise, he also diminished the lengths that he was behind. So he's already shown that he can make up some ground. So at 6 to 1 in the morning line, I know that Wilkes doesn't like to put too much pressure on his first-time starters.
Absolutely.
Well, this is the second time. This is the second time this horse has run. And I think that he actually ran better than his line shows because of the early trouble he got in. I really think that Rye Sense of Humor, if he goes off anywhere near 6 to 1, even 5 to 1, I want to bet him with both fists.
Completely agree with you. He's my top selection in here too. What was nice is you mentioned the trouble early, and then what I liked was he showed some professionalism to kind of duck down to the inside and split horses. That's something that's not easy for a horse making their first start, moving in and out and around. I feel like he learned a lot out of that debut race. I'm totally with you. Rye's Sense of Humor looks good. And yeah, I mean, for me, a couple of the others, I think you mentioned the very live first timers. Like Copley is coming out of a good race up at Woodbine, but if he takes a ton of money, I'd prefer Rye's Sense of Humor. Absolutely. And so I wouldn't want Copley at too short of a price in here. The 3 maybe is a long shot who showed a little bit of speed. The Dam was actually a good one, and this horse has the ability, has the opportunity and maybe some upside to be a little bit better. So this horse could be decent down the line. I wouldn't be shocked, but Devil's Tower was another who I think could at least hit the board in here. Raced pretty well in the debut. Speed in between 3, battling, just missed. This is a good race. This is a fun race. It really is. This is like a great pick 4, pick 5 race.
Sure. And then number 12, King's Promise. I mean, he made his debut on turf. He's getting an extra half furlong here, but to me, he looks like a horse that needs a little bit more distance. I don't think the half furlong extra is going to really help him. I think he's going to do better as he goes longer, but he's a horse you might want to pay attention to down the road.
Completely agree. I have him pegged like in the 3rd and 4th spot too. Right. So if this is a deep leg for you in a pick 5 or a pick 4, he's one that I'd for sure be throwing into the ticket because he made a really big wide move and was a clear cut second. That's the thing about the races we have to discuss. They're really good betting races as we move.
Yes.
So for you, it's 11 is the horse to beat and the horse to play, and you're going to key around maybe in the 4th.
Yeah, the 1-5-12 for me.
Cool. Let's get to race number 5. We go a mile and a 16th allowance. These are first level allowance races worth $100,000. Gee, these purses, they wanted to draw in some big fields for Oaks and Derby, and they got them. So this race, I mean, another one, you have a lukewarm morning line favorite of around 3-1. I wouldn't be shocked if any of 2 or 3 horses actually were to end up going favored in here. Who are some that you look to?
Well, there's not a lot of speed here in this race. And as you said, the number 5, Spanish Kingdom, he did face Graded Stakes Company last out. And although he finished 5th, he only lost by 1 length. So he's going to be the favorite. He's going to be bet. The number 10, Parkland, with Giroux aboard, should be near the front. Even though, like I said, there's not a lot of speed, he should be forwardly placed. He faces winners for the first time, which could be a difficult task for him. That's usually one of the biggest jumps is from breaking your maiden and going against winners. To me, the horse that's very interesting here is number 8, On a Spree. He's been running in further races, in marathon races. He cuts back in distance. He should be coming in fresh and fit, and he gets a little bit of a positive jockey change. And so for me, I really think that he represents a lot of value. He plays 7-2 on the morning line. Mike Maker and Gaffney, he might get bet a little bit, but I think he's one that I can really hone in on in this race.
And if he's close early, he's going to be really tough to pass because of those because he's coming out of those longer races. He's got bottom with the 1.5 race their last time out, and he's not a horse that we worry about getting this kind of a trip. So if he's sitting 2nd or 3rd, or even on the lead in a race that you mentioned doesn't have a ton of speed, then it's going to be really, really tough to get by. And for the same reason that you mentioned, a horse that I'm going to throw in, as bettors, we definitely remember the horses that we get the head-scratching trips with, and that was Cavalry Charge for me. I played at Keeneland on July the 8th, and I thought, okay, drawn to the outside, Sorts just showed some speed going long. All the races that he's got going long, he's right on the lead showing speed, and he just had a wide trip. It was a brutal trip. He has one of those no chance to win trips where you're just sitting 4 wide mid-pack that's like all the way around. I think they're going to get a little more aggressive with him because that's what has done well for him. So I expect him to be close in a race, as you mentioned, that has no speed. So Cavalry Charge will be on my tickets. A bust-out long shot that I'm going to throw in is Job Security. Probably more underneath. I'll throw him in a pick 5 or 2 because he did have a horrendous trip. Does that mean he can win this race just because he had a really bad trip last time out? No, but he doesn't seem too far behind this group in what looks like a pretty wide open group again. Maybe Trident hit first time on the grass. They have 5 winning turf siblings. You mentioned Spanish Kingdom. So again, you mentioned On a Spree. You mentioned Parkland. So we mentioned 8 horses in this race too, which just shows you how tough this one is again. So kind of stack them up for us as you find. How would you finalize this race?
I would probably go 8 on top. I do think that the 5 will be there, so I'd probably go 8, 5, and 10 for me.
Nice. Let's move to race number 6, another $100,000 first level allowance, 7 furlongs on the dirt. These are the 3-year-olds and upward. So we look at this group, and again, these are horses that are nice animals. They're just a cut below the stakes horses and maybe on the upswing, or horses who have had some issues. I mean, just looking at this race from a handicapping standpoint, and if you can very easily right off the bat build cases for Sir Alfred James, Coastal Defense, Wayno, Wild Poppet, Cool Body, Street Class, Verb, Cowboy Diplomacy, who was the first time gelding, was super impressive last time out. So again, no joke, legitimately you can make cases for all of them. Does that mean you use them all in the exotics? No, you got to pick and choose some and cut some out here and there. But I'm saying it again. Our little chunk of races that I think that you and I had might have been the most competitive, even more than the deep stakes. And I'm talking with anyone or any of the other races. These were just really, really fun and difficult races to handicap.
Yeah, this one came out pretty competitive too. And when I look at the entries, I see horses that I've bet in different positions before, like in previous races, like Verb, like number 8 Verb. I've liked that horse before. I don't know if I bet him when he won last out, but I know that I've bet him in the past. I don't really like him so much here. When I first handicapped this race, two horses really stuck out at me, but I'm going to go with 3. The one that sticks out the most is number 6, Cool Bobby. I think Cool Bobby always especially in the last 2 races, has been right there
with the excuse 3 back too.
3 back.
He needed the race off the long layoff for the new barn, and he's been good in 2 starts since.
So always involved. I mean, if you look back, he's always there. I think that's a horse that fits well in this.
Yep.
The one that I like the best, however, is number 2, Sir Alfred James. Yeah. And the thing I like about Sir Alfred James, he's only raced twice. But if you look at if you look at his running lines, if you watch the video or the replays of him, you know that he really, really, when he gets to the wire, he's in full out mode. He's really running hard. So he's not just getting to the wire, in the nick of time to win. He's really at his best late in the race, and I really think that's going to continue here. I think he's the most logical winner of this race, the number 2, Sir Alfred James. He might not be forwardly placed, but at the end of this 7 furlong sprint, he's really going to be chugging. And he's the one that I like the most. But I also like number 5, Wild Poppet.
Yeah.
10-1 on the morning line. Just because this one can, if you look at, I use the Timeform pace projector. He's projected to be up front a little bit. I don't think he's going to be that forwardly placed as the pace projector says. I think this is another one like Sir Alfred James who runs well late. I mean, 2 back, he didn't do hardly anything at all. Actually, 3 back, he didn't do hardly anything at all. But he's always in the mix. And at 10-1, I think he's a horse that you definitely need to use. I like the 2 most of all. And then number 6, Cool Bobby, and then number 5. So 2, 6, 5 for me. But you could make a case for half the field.
Oh, yeah, it's great. And all the ones that you made cases for were definitely horses that I've looked to. I want to mention a couple others before we move along. The 3 Coastal Defense. This horse is actually a half to a nice horse named Hawkbill. So it wouldn't be, who earned $4.7 million. It wouldn't be a shock to see Coastal Defense continue to improve and start to live up to a pedigree. And if you toss the turf race, then you look at his form overall. It's really not that bad. He was 4th in his debut when he drew the rail, and then he was 4th second time out at Gulfstream Park. That was his first start going long. He wasn't far behind Gray's Fable, who we see in a lot of running lines in the couple races that we looked at. And then he came back in his 2 starts. He won over this track at Churchill Downs going a mile where he came from off the pace. That was in the slop. And then at Ellis Park, he was really good. He was just beating the neck. He settled. He was 3 deep. He loomed up. He just couldn't hold off the 4-5 favorite, and it looked like at the top of the lane that favorite was going to blow right by him, and he really battled all the way and tried hard. So I'm going to play him as well. You mentioned the 2 Sir Alfred James. You mentioned the 6 Cool Bobby, he's probably the measuring stick. Like if nobody jumps up and runs a race good enough to win, Bobby will probably win this race. He feels like I like exactly what you had said. He's just so consistent. You'd feel like he's going to be there. And then in Cowboy Diplomacy at the Diplomacy, I always butcher that word. Yeah. At the end, he'll be around at the very least early. He was super impressive, and now he's going to go as a first time gelding. So just another crazy good betting race in the 6th at Churchill. Our last race, the 7th, and then we'll mention a couple thoughts on the Derby. Let's get to race number 7 here. We have how about Signalman, who we remember from a few years back. Signalman, who Breeders' Cup Juvenile, and he was on the Derby trail. He didn't get in the Derby, but he ended up running in the Preakness, and he's one of those horses I always remember. Bodie Express may run in this spot. He's cross-entered in a couple different spots, but just the morning lines in all the races that we had, they might not all be right. There may be a horse or 2 that ends up getting bet, but it just shows you how spread out and how wide open they are. Here again, there are a bunch of horses that you could make cases for between anywhere up to 10, 15 to 1 that you could make legitimate cases for. Who are some that you look to in this race?
Well, this is the race that of the four that I'm going over. I had the absolute hardest time coming up with anybody here, and the reason for it is just like you said. You can make case for almost every single horse in this race. I mean, I really wish I could just go all here. I guess it all depends on what Boat Express does. If Boat Express starts in this race, he'll be forwardly placed. Against this group, he could just go take him all the way. So he's somebody that I would definitely need to use.
And he at least changes the complexion of the race too, just adding a major speed factor. That changes things for a horse like Aurelius Maximus. That just kind of changes everything. You look at him like maybe he won't have as good of an opportunity with the Bodie Express. So he's a real key factor in this race.
Right. And the thing is even if he races in this race and he gets out to a big lead and he cooks up front, then it could open up for the closer. I mean, just because he's going to be up front doesn't mean he's going to win the race. He's good enough, obviously, to do that. But, I mean, that takes away from Casino Star. That takes away from Signalman. That takes away from Aurelius Maximus, like you said. Closers like that. Even Signalman, who is, projected to be way at the back of the pack, that takes away. So for me, this is a real hard race to say a couple days ahead of time who I really like. I mean, if somebody said, hey, you need to give me 4 horses in this race that you would use, I mean, I guess I would go with Bodie Express for sure, just because I don't know whether he's going to be in or not. And he's, pace dependent here. But Aurelius Maximus, the number 9, I think, regardless of who gets up front, I think this is one that will be closing late.
Yep.
The other one that I liked was the number 12 horse. Locally owned. I think locally owned is proven to be a horse that can be near the front and do well. So, I mean, it's just this whole race is pace dependent. So for me, I mean, I like the 12. I like the 9. Even a little bit was on the 5. Who's the 5? Oh, Tank Commander. I've bet Tank Commander before. This is one of those horses.
Big win last time out over this track.
He won last time out. And I think I bet this horse last year in his maiden. Yeah, I bet this horse when he broke his maiden last year at Churchill. I think I was there that day. So this is a horse that could definitely get the job done. It's just a really, really, really tough race. I mean, I maybe not use all, but I could probably use 3/4 of the horses in this race. It's really tough.
Absolutely. You mentioned Signalman, who I think he's going to give a good account of himself, but that doesn't mean win. I feel like he might be rounding back. You could toss his last race. His 2 back on the dirt wasn't bad. He was chasing a lone speed horse that day and top seed. The horse that I think I'm the most interested in here is actually the number 7, Chess Chief. Yeah. So I'm looking at his last start. He was actually favored in a kind of a similar spot at Churchill in June. And he had a good start. He took back to 8th. He was in between. And then he ran into tons of traffic. And once he got clear, he closed really well. He closed well. He just missed 3rd. It was just a little bit too late. Prior to that, he ran into By My Standards a couple times. At that Oaklawn race on May the 2nd, and this is something we've talked about, that was a loaded race. Remember, that was pandemic time. So those graded races, that grade 2 was so deep. You had By My Standards, Warriors Charge, Mr. Freeze, Tacitus, Tax, Night Ops, Combatant, all in that race. It's just a tough race for Chess Chief. I think it's a really good spot for him here. He doesn't have to be as far back as you would think just based on his last race. He actually has a little more tactical speed than it seems. I think he's going to be in a good spot here. Comes out of a race with 2 next out winners. So Chess Chief would be one that's going to be on. I'm with you. I'm going to be spreading, but he's at least one that'll be on most of my tickets in this spot here. So, man, we had a little section. If you're out there and you're someone who was just going to maybe look at the stakes race section of the Churchill card on Saturday, I can totally understand why you do that. There's a lot of races out there, but take a minute and look at races 4, 5, 6, and 7, the ones that we just talked about, because
tough.
You'll at least probably find one horse in one of those races that's 5 or 10 to 1 that you might want to bet to win. You'll find someone there that you go, wow, this horse is going to be like 8 to 1. I got to bet 20 to win on him, 10 to win on him, something like that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, even in this 7th race, the number 8, Mr. Quality for Tim Gleishaw, this horse, if Bodie Express isn't up front, this one's going to be up front. But even if Bodie Express does run, he's really going to give him a run. He's one of those tough-headed. He's a hard trier. He's a hard knocker. So I mean, he's 20 to 1 on the morning line. Not saying he's going to win the race, but at a mile and the 16th, if he stays engaged for a long time, he could pick up a piece at a very nice price.
Let's get to the Derby. We'll get to some thoughts. You and I actually dissected most of this field a few weeks ago when they had just really finalized who had all their points and talked about who was going to run and not. So we have a lot of thoughts on record about this field, but now you've seen the post positions, you've seen the morning line odds. We know exactly who's in the field. Give us a minute or two. How are you approaching this race from a betting standpoint? Can Tiz the Law be beat? Are you going to play him and maybe just use exactas tries with some nice horses underneath and try to catch him? What's your approach to the Derby this year?
I mean, I have a hard time seeing Tiz the Law not winning this race, and that really makes me upset as a handicapper and as a bettor. It really makes me upset because I'm not going to make a whole lot of money unless I can identify the two horses that come underneath for the trifecta, and those two horses can't be Honor AP and can't be Authentic.
I know.
And the problem with this is there's a good chance that one or both of them are going to do it. I mean, there's a good chance we could have a very, very chalky Kentucky Derby. But I will give you and everybody else horses that I think outside of the outside horses. I mean, is anybody going to be watching any other part of the starting gate than the
outside five?
That's it.
Yeah.
That's it.
Yeah.
I think in a race like this, you always have to look at the other Baffert. I think 1,000 Words, had this race gone in May, I don't think he would have been a horse I even would have thought about. But since we've seen what he's done since, he's a multiple graded stakes winner. And the only time he's raced outside of Kentucky, he ran 30 lengths back, which, they wrapped him up. They knew he wasn't going to do well, so they shut him down. So I'm fine with that. And he won last out at 1/16 over Honor AP. Giroux gets the mount. I think this is a horse that, he's in form. He's got a trainer who's done well. He's got a jockey. If you look at the jockeys in this race, Florent Giroux is one of the more accomplished, even though he hasn't won. He's been in a lot of Kentucky Derbies, and I think 1,000 Words is unrecognized here.
With a horse like him too, and I imagine for a pure running style perspective, especially when you have someone like Giroux aboard, they have to just get aggressive. And that doesn't mean be on the lead, but he's not the type. He's like a grinder. So he's not going to come from 15 lengths behind and pass everybody. But if he's in the top pack and he's sitting close, he just keeps grinding all the way. And there'll be horses that start backing up and he'll continue to grind. So for him, it's going to, like most of these horses, I think a lot of them, especially other than the top few who maybe the only horses that would be good enough to win a race that didn't have a beneficial trip, they're going to need the beneficial trip to hit the board, and they're going to need to jump up with probably a career best to beat a Tiz the Law. Because like you said, it's just the gambler, the bettor in me wants so bad, but then you remove Art Collector, who at the very least you feel like Art Collector would have made the race more difficult on Tiz the Law by being either on the lead or maybe sitting right next to Tiz the Law and trying to go with him when he goes. Now you take out the horse who was probably the second choice, and something we talked about before, there's no Charlatan, Nadal, Maxfield, those other horses that would have been in the next few choices. It really does feel like it is Tiz the Law versus the field. It kind of does. It really does.
Correct. I agree with you 100%. And one thing I've looked at the entries here is there's like pairs of horses. If you like 1,000 Words, then you probably like New York Traffic for the same reason.
No, it's true. It's true.
And if you like Sol Volante, who's a big closer, you probably like Enforceable for the same reason. So those
or even
are
a Max Player
horses
in that group. You can put Max Player. You're totally right. There are, and there's some that they fit very similar profiles, and so that's a great point. So it's just it's a different year. And between the Oaks, between the Derby, we have some nice horses. It's different because we know them more now. So normally in a Derby Oaks year in May, we still have these horses that come in. There's some upside. We don't know how it's going to happen. By now, we know Swiss Skydiver, Gamine. We know Tiz the Law. We know these animals. So it's less likely that something strange is going to happen when we have a bigger body of work to see.
Yeah, I'm excited to see how it goes
Me too.
As a fan, but I'm not expecting to make a whole lot of money.
Yeah, and that's what the undercards might be for. We still have plenty of opportunities, and that's what some of the races that we just talked about. If you're not going to, feel like you want to spend a whole lot, or maybe you play small, pick 4 or 5 late, maybe the middle part of the card is where you open things up a little bit, and that's where you make your money. Because wouldn't it be nice to make a bunch of money and then kick back and just watch afterwards once you've already got your tickets cashed? So, Ryan, awesome stuff, man. I really appreciate it. Thank you for coming and joining us. Give everybody out there your plugs. Where can we find you on social media and follow along?
Well, you can find me on Twitter at rdickey249. I'm pretty much on there 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. So you can find me always there. But I really appreciate you having me on, and it's really fun. I can't wait to listen to the whole show and hear what everybody else has to say about the other races on the undercard.
We got Barry opening things up, Barry Spears, nice. And you're the second hitter. Craig Milkowski's in the 3 hole. He's going to be jumping in, going races 8, 9, 10. And his thoughts on the Derby, and then Emily is going to be closing things out. Emily Gullikson, she's going to close things out with the lead up to the Derby. So we got a nice little 1, 2, 3, 4 punch here for our full card Saturday. Ryan, thank you so much, buddy. Have a great weekend. I hope you make a ton of money.
Thank you very much. I appreciate it.
Folks, don't go anywhere. We will be right back with plenty more on that Saturday Churchill card. Thank you to Ryan for talking races 4, 5, 6, 7, and the Derby. We put Ryan to work over the last month or so, because he was one of the first ones that came on and talked about all the Derby contenders with us about a month ago, and now back. We had to have him back because we gave a little taste. We told you some of the early thoughts. We had to get some of the final thoughts from Ryan, and we will now move along to races 8, 9, and 10 with Craig Milkowski. We'll get some of Craig's thoughts on the Derby also. At first, we have to talk about our friends over at SarahCandles.com. Sarah Candle Company. Do you love candles? Are you someone who burns a lot of candles in your house? You're maybe looking for a nice scent to change the mood. Sometimes maybe one of your friends is really into candles, or your family members, husband, wife, boyfriend, girlfriend, son, daughter, cousin, anyone that you know. Give Sarah Candles a look. I personally know the people who created this company, and initially what they were doing was looking to build a candle for themselves that they would like, that could be a little bit healthier. They all read about all the stuff in paraffin wax, and by using soy wax, they've eliminated all the toxins and the carcinogens and those pollutants that are present in paraffin wax, which is in a lot of the other leading brands. If you look at their website, sarahcandles.com, they have 25 different scents for you. They have 3 different sizes. These are super affordable candles. And then when you use the promo code GINO, it'll get you 10% off of your purchase. You're going to be helping out with a small business, someone who really wants to have a candle made that you will like, that you will enjoy. SarahCandles.com, promo code GINO. They give you instructions on how to make sure your candle, it gets you the perfect burn. And with that soy wax and with these better ingredients, they actually give you a longer burn. It's healthier for everyone breathing this in, and you're going to get more use out of these candles that are already more affordable, and they're already candles that are just better for you, plain and simple. SarahCandles.com, CERA Candles.com. Don't forget about that promo code GINO. Get you 10% off your purchase. Now, Craig Milkowski, Timeform US. We're going to go over races 8, 9, 10, and the Derby with Craig. Continuing to move through the big Saturday card at Churchill Downs, and one of the usual suspects when it's time to talk big days and big racing, our good buddy from Timeform US, Craig Milkowski. And Craig, before we get into our section of the Churchill Downs Saturday card and then the Derby, as a fan, I know it was probably a really strange year for you as an Oklahoma City Thunder fan. You come into the year not really expecting a whole lot. Everybody even says, is Chris Paul going to be on this team? And then you have this great year. You make it to Game 7, round 1 of the playoffs. It's probably a little bittersweet because it's overall, when you look at the grand scheme of everything, it still probably feels like a pretty solid, positive year. It was a very winnable Game 7. That probably lives a little bit of a sour taste in your mouth.
It does, but like you said, overall, it was a really good year. Like I said, I think I mentioned the last time I was on with you, this was the most fun I've had as a Thunder fan in a long time, because this was actually a team instead of Russell Westbrook and Paul George just taking 90% of the shots and controlling the ball. And Chris Paul really won me over. He's been the consummate professional here. I don't know if he'll be here next year. He played so well that he may actually have some some good trade value with just 1 year left on his monster contract. But if he stays, that would be great as well. But, Oklahoma City still in that rebuilding mode. They have tons of draft picks, and I think we did see they have some really good young promising players and guys like Shai Gilgeous-Alexander, even Lou Dort, who was just crazy good. And that guy, for an undrafted free agent to do what he did in a Game 7 is just unheard of.
It was really fun to watch, and I think Shai is going to really gain a lot out of this experience, just being able to learn what it takes, kind of see, Chris trying to lead the team through this. And it's funny because, you take the three major figures in this series with Chris Paul, Russell Westbrook, and James Harden. They're probably the three best active players that haven't won a title. So anytime they're in a playoff series with some of the struggles that they've had, it really enhances it. This was a fun series with all those storylines back and forth. The team, they've played for each other, they played against each other, the trades, everything. It was just a really fun first round series, and as an NBA fan overall, I enjoyed the back and forth. And I got to be honest, I was just for your sake and just for getting your team another through another round, I was rooting for your team to come and play the Lakers. So now the Lakers will end up playing Houston. But it was fun. And hey, as sports fans, it's nice now versus 6 months ago. At least we have some baseball, some basketball. I know you and I are getting ready for a fantasy football draft next week for, I think, our third. We're big horse racing fans, and we're going to get right into horse racing in about 5 seconds. But it's nice when we have some other options out there too.
Yeah, it sure is. Plenty of sports to watch. I love hockey. As my wife will tell you,
some tennis.
I will basically watch. Yeah, tennis is going. I will watch anything that they find a way to keep score. I'll learn enough about it to know what I'm watching. I usually can't do it, but I can figure out what's happening. And yeah, I just love competition. So, and that's probably what drew me to horse racing. So probably a good segue into that.
Let's see if we can do it this weekend. We're going to go to Saturday's card. We're going to go to race number 8 at Churchill Downs, and we're going to be looking at the American turf here. So this is an interesting group because, Craig, at first glance, when you look at this race on paper, it just looks like there is a ton of speed, and almost everyone in here feels like they do their best running either right on the lead or really, really close to it. So, when you see horses like Smooth Like Straight, who you expect is going to be quick, Fancy Liquor's pretty quick. And then I think, 2 horses to the inside make it a quick pace too, with a question mark wild card like Tyshawn trying the grass for the first time. American Butterfly has been close in sprint races and now stretches out. How do you see this race early? Because to me, I thought it would be going really, really quick.
Excuse my cough, and I'm having some allergy issues today. No COVID worries here, hopefully, so far. Rough allergy day. But, I agree with you. Our time form U.S. pace projector has it as a race we predict the pace to be fast, and most of the time I agree with it, but not always. But I do in this case. There's plenty of speed signed on. Unfortunately, that led me down the path that I think Field Pass is going to be really tough in here. He's a horse who comes in with as good a speed figures as anybody. He's a little more versatile than some of the others. He's one wire to wire, but he's also one coming from off the pace a little bit. So I do think he is the horse to beat in here, but I don't think he's a lock by any stretch. And if I was going to look for a price in here, I'm actually leaning to the 3-horse Segoy.
Yep.
He's a horse who went wire to wire last time, but I don't think he is a horse who has to have the lead. He's shown that he can rate last time or in the past. Last time it was just more of a case, in my opinion, where they just handed him the lead in really slow fractions, and he took it and was able to finish off the race pretty easily at a nice price. But what impressed me the most is the jump in the speed figure he got on turf in his first try on that surface for trainer Michael Tomlinson after he was claimed for $50,000. And given the fact he was able to, on turf, so what I call rate on the lead, he was able to set that slow pace and really finish. I think he's the one of the longer prices who could adapt it and make a good run in here.
Yeah, I think it's very similar about this race. Like Field Pass just seems like he's the most versatile. It's a great spot for him. Maybe there were a couple excuses you could give him for last time out. He was forwardly placed. He's a little bit wide. I just honestly think it might have been a group that was just a tad better than him, a little bit tougher. And this is a nice spot here. So he's going to have to beat Smooth Like Straight, who got the better of him when they hooked up at Churchill back in May. And Smooth Like Straight has some ability, but it's interesting. You don't generally see these West Coast turf horses come into a group like this and be a short price favorite. So he could win this race, no doubt. He's going to have his work cut out for him, though, with a ton of other speed in here. I'm completely in agreement using the 3 Savoy on all tickets. I think he ends up putting himself in a good spot. I kind of use the 1 as a wild card, Tyshawn trying the grass for the first time. I had high hopes for him earlier on in the year at Oaklawn. I don't really know how good he is, but he has a little turf pedigree. Other than the ones we mentioned, is there anyone else in here that you want to mention anything about?
No, I mean, Tyshawn is definitely the wild card. I agree. I looked at his breeding. There's not a whole lot there. There's not really negatives, but not a lot of positive.
That's a good way to put it.
Either, but he's going to be a price. And if I'm playing horizontal tickets, he's certainly one I will use in the, like as a B or a C type, that if he wins, I don't want to get knocked out of it early.
So let's move from the American Turf in race number 8 to the Pat Day Mile in race number 9. And this has become sort of the B race for the 3-year-olds on Kentucky Derby weekend, as many don't want to go that far, or horses who were maybe sprinters that wanted to stretch out. They kind of end up here. You have some intriguing horses, and just based off the morning line, Cezanne is the one that is going to take the most money, or at least they expect to take a good amount of money in here from the inside. But after you get past Cezanne, I mean, he's lightly raced. He hasn't really done much wrong either, but he was 4th in that small field. It was sort of a strange race, though, because at the top of the lane, he looked like he might win that race, Craig, and he moved into the lead, and then his stablemate, Thousand Words, just kind of kept grinding on the inside, and it seemed like the last 16th of a mile really did Cezanne in.
Yeah, he's the one horse in here I'm really not sure what to do with, because I would argue, and maybe you'd agree with me given what you just said, I almost think he ran his best race last time out.
Yeah, I agree.
Because on the speed figure scale, he certainly did from us. He was part of a quick pace. He did back up a little bit at the end, but, he was facing a run in the Kentucky Derby. A few races later on, one of them is the second choice almost assuredly in Honor AP. So, it's just there are pluses and minuses with him. I like the speed figure. He comes in with the best one in the field. I like the turn back a little bit. What I don't like is that inside draw and
Completely
the fact that no paroles in the race. I've just never been a fan of that inside post for the mile races at Churchill. It's a really funky setup. It's a chute, but it's kind of angled in a weird way, and horses just seem to find bad trips from there. And if I thought he was going to break clear and clear early, I'd probably like him a lot more than I do. So he's one I'll use, but I don't love in here.
Yeah, you mentioned No Parole, who I think you have to really talk about, at least as a horse who, the race sort of goes through, because on paper he's no doubt the quickest. But we saw last time out, he's a speed horse, and even if he gets clear, it doesn't always mean things are going to go well for him. On paper, he probably clears this thing, right? Does he get the kind of pace pressure that you think he folds? Does he have a shot to hold on here? Where do you stand with him?
I do think he'll clear, and I think he's going to make the lead, but I think he only knows one way to run. He's just going to go fast and see if he can hang on. And for me, the distance is a real question mark for him. His win in the Grade 1 Woody Stevens, not to take too much away from it, but he got clear. He didn't really get challenged at all, and it was a track that, frankly, I think was favoring speed in the rail. I was against him in the Jerkins, and he didn't run. I think he was acting up that day, if I remember right. Tom Amos was talking about it on the FS1 or FS2, whatever network they were on, how he just wasn't himself. He almost told you he wasn't going to win that day. He could just tell by the body language, but at the mile, I'm just not a fan of his. I think he's trouble for other speeds in here, but I don't think he's one that I will be using at all. no matter how I play the race, because I think he's going to set the pace and fade. I'm going to lean to a couple other horses in here. And the top one is going to be Tap at the Win. I actually really liked his race in that Jerkins where he kind of tracked No Parole just a few lengths off. He actually took over the lead. He was kind of lost a few lengths around the turn. And while he was eventually run down by Echo Town, who's probably going to be the favorite or second choice in here, I think that win margin of 3.5 lengths is really exaggerated that day because of the pace. Echo Town just got a much nicer, cleaner trip. He was able to just sit much further back and make that late run, and it was timed better, whereas Tap at the Win probably moved a little bit early when No Parole gave up the lead. So I favor him a little bit, but I think either one of the two could win.
Yeah, you mentioned Echo Town, and I think the post also has something to do with it. Echo Town is nice, too, where I'm a little concerned if he gets shuffled down towards the inside and has to try to come out. I don't think he wants to come from way out of it. 4 or 5 lengths like he did last time out is probably about as far where he wants to come out. Tap It to Win should sit a really nice trip. Yeah, is there anyone else in here who you're looking to? I mean, towards the outside, what do we do with someone like Rushy, who's going to be turning back from the San Diego Derby and the Bluegrass?
Yeah, Rushy's one I'm definitely going to use. I definitely like these turnbacks into 7 furlong and mile races for horses that were on the Derby trail like he was. He certainly didn't embarrass himself. He ran well. He's got a whole bunch of really big names in his past performances, and I think he'll appreciate the cutback. He gets a great post position. There should be plenty of pace, and I think he's one of the main contenders in here. If I had to rank them, I would go Tap It to Win first and probably Rushy second, even over Echo Town.
Yeah, we're similar in here. I throw Echo Town in the mix with those top 3. I do. Looking at anyone that might be a deep or long shot, is there any wild cards in here? I didn't know really what to do with Vertical Threat. I just have a hard time getting a gauge for just using, for example, Vertical Threat comes that small field of 4 that he won, but Cezanne actually was dead last in that field of 4 that I probably like that race a little bit better and at least get a better feel for the company. I didn't really know what to do with Vertical Threat.
Yeah, I don't like Vertical Threat. He's too slow on my speed figures, whereas the others are approaching 120, and Cezanne is actually topped 120. He's barely hitting 110, so that's a pretty big gap there. If I were going to look for a price in here, it would be Digital, who gave Echo Town all he wanted in an allowance race at Oaklawn back in May. He tried the turf last time. That didn't work out very well, but I'm just going to put a line through that race. And he looks like one who could have a shot if he gets some pace, because he's certainly one that likes to come from behind. And as I said, he gave Echo Town all he wanted that day at Oaklawn. And I'm pretty sure, if memory serves, Echo Town was a big favorite that day for Steve Asmussen.
We move along to race number 10, which is the Grade 3 Iroquois. We're going to have some 2-year-olds here going a mile. And what's interesting about this group is the 10 Ride of a Lifetime is going to take a lot of money, and I think a deserving favorite. Just if you're looking on speed figures, he's been beaten by 1 horse in 3 races, and that same horse beat him twice. And so I think the race will at least go through him. You have some horses, though, who when you see these horses that generally are in some of these 2-year-old stakes races, a lot of times they're horses who are really quick and won races because they were precocious, they were quick, and they opened up. There were like 4 or 5 horses in here who actually closed a pretty good amount of ground to break their maiden, but they didn't earn big or gaudy speed figures. That's why this race is a little bit kind of funky on paper. Does it look like the Ride of a Lifetime just towers over this field?
For me personally, and it might sound weird coming from a guy who does speed figures for a living, you cannot bet these horses with big figures stretching out like he is, particularly stretching out 2 furlongs. I don't care how good they look. Usually if they run that well at 6 furlongs, and especially a horse like him who was fading last time, Jackie's Warrior was running away from him, I just don't get the impression he wants any parts of a mile. Now, if he beats me, great. I can live with that at 7-5. But overall, you're just going to do a lot better ignoring horses like this because more often than not, they're going to disappoint. So I'm going to look elsewhere. I generally look for horses who have shown some speed. And the one I like in here, shown some speed, but also shown they can finish, is what I was trying to get at. And the horse I really like in here is Midnight Bourbon for Steve Asmussen, which seems to be a common theme these days. The guy's winning races everywhere. Yeah. But I'll be surprised if I get that 6-1 that's on the morning line just because of the connections. But I really like this horse's maiden win. He ran that mile at Ellis Park. It's kind of a weird configuration. It's not the one-turn mile that we see at Churchill, but it's not 2 turns either. It's kind of a turn and a half, but he's handled the distance, and I like that he was able to sit up close to that speed. The pace was pretty quick early. He took over and just ran away from the group. It's a race which has come back pretty strong as horses have run back from it. So he's the one for me if I can get anywhere near that price.
Yeah, the 4 Ultimate Badger had some pretty late energy too. He was sitting and he really drew off nicely. Joe Talamo had a very nice meet over there. And then some horses who I don't know how good they are, but when you go back and watch some of these replays visually, like the 1 Drop Anchor looked good, but will have a lot to do from the rail. The 2 Sitting on a Go was super impressive, but really low on the buyer scale and just kind of on some of the speed figure scales that you might be looking at. But you do have, like I said, some professional horses who maybe they got a figure that was a little bit low, but they do have ability. As you said, it's difficult with these lightly raced 2-year-olds sometimes. If one race gets rated a little bit lower than the others, and then the speed figures and everything can look a little bit off. There's no reason why some horses can't jump up and run better. And I think exotically, Midnight Bourbon is an absolute must-use. Like you said, you're proven at the mile, and this is a horse who really took a nice step forward and feels like you get past the ride of a lifetime, he's right there with the rest of the group. So, yeah, you're going to have to pick in some of these races which of these short price horses are you going to check out. This looks like it might be one for you. Anyone else in here that drew your eye or someone to throw in?
I mean, the one, I guess you got to keep an eye on Superstock from the same trainer just because he gets his top rider. I'm sure he had his pick of which ones he's had. He comes in with a lower speed figure last time, going 5.5 at Lone Star. The time before that, he did run a bigger speed figure, and no offense to Steve Asmussen's kid, but it's a huge rider upgrade when you go to Santana from his son, who's, I don't remember if he's still an apprentice or not, but he's just not of the same quality. So I'm not going to put a whole lot of stock in that last speed figure being lower. I think he's one who will stretch out just fine.
We get to the Derby, and a Kentucky Derby in September, Craig, and really just, we have to give some praise to Tiz the Law for being so good for so long. He's done so little wrong in his career, while so many horses have kind of come and gone. He's been there all along, and you have to start with him, especially when a lot of the major contenders continue to defect a little bit. We saw Art Collector in the last few days. No, that he's not going to be in there. He would have probably been your second choice. So Tiz the Law, where do you stand with him, and how do you approach this race from a betting standpoint?
Before the Travers, I was looking forward to the Derby, hoping that Tiz the Law would win and come in and that I'd be able to bet against him. Just because he hadn't really run that big speed figure, he was just kind of beating up on horses who weren't as good as him. I mean, if you look back through the horses who have finished second in his races, there's just not a whole lot there. I don't think any of them are actually in this field, just trying to go from memory, but Dr. Post elected to go somewhere else. So I don't think he's been beating a whole lot, but the last race kind of dispelled some of those doubts. He ran a 126 time form U.S. speed figure from us. It's a really good number. It's what you expect from 3-year-olds this time of year. Normally in the Derby, if we get a 125 in May, that's a huge number. Like horses like Justify and American Pharaoh were running. The average is more like a 120. But we got to look at it from that perspective. These are 3-year-olds. They're improving. They're maturing. They're going to run faster. So, I mean, I'm kind of handicapping this race almost like a normal season Travers, where the horses are a little more developed. And I think he's going to be very, very hard to beat. But I do think there is one horse who can do it, and that's Honor AP. If you force me to say who's going to win, and I had to put my house on it, I'd probably say Tiz the Law. But from a betting standpoint, if the odds are anything like the morning line and he's 6 or 7 times the price that Tiz the Law is, I'm going to be on Honor AP. I mean, I trust John Sheriff's. I was convinced the day watching that Shared Belief Stakes that it was absolutely nothing but a prep race from him. He had kind of a goofy trip, and for some reason, people seem to think he's this big closer, and they talk about how he's going to be coming from off the pace, but he's a horse who's always shown plenty of speed other than his first race where he just kind of was figuring things out. But he's a horse who I think is maybe, just a few steps slower than Tiz the Law, but it's the Derby. It's a big field. Anything can happen. So I'm not going to take a 3 to 5 or whatever he's going to be when there's a horse as good as Honor AP. So not really a big, win bet for me, but I'm going to be using those two in vertical bets like tries and supers, and I'm going to concentrate a lot of them with Honor AP on top.
Yep, he's a top horse for me too. It was one of those situations where he really just didn't need the race last time out. You said it right. Weird, bizarre. It's kind of a funky trip that he had where he had to kind of come up and press early. That's not what he wants to do. You hit it right. He's not a stone cold closer, but he just doesn't want to be second pressing the horse that's on the lead. And so a trip in between those two is where he should be, drawn towards the outside. I don't mind him losing some ground as long as he's able to stay sort of in the clear, because I don't want him to have to get stopped and started. If he's able to get in the clear and you just kind of sit to the outside and pass some of the horses who have been in front of him involved early, that's the kind of trip I hope he gets. And he really just feels like the horse who is, if you're against Tiz the Law, he's got to be the real big major contender in here with a little bit of upside that feels like on his A game and on his best day, he can even deal with Tiz the Law. Everyone else feels like, you know what, maybe Tiz the Law, maybe Honor AP would have to show up with a less than A performance from them. Give me 1 or 2 long shots for people to throw in, underneath in some of their exotics, tries, supers, any horses that you think that are biggish kind of prices that could outrun their odds.
Yeah, I like Max Player in here a bit. I'll get to one I actually like a little bit more in a sec. I'm kind of going by post position order, but I think Max Player is a horse who's going to love the 1.25 miles. He's done better as the races have gotten longer. His figures are getting better as he matures. And in that Travers, the pace was kind of slow. He didn't really have a whole lot to latch on to there and make his run. He was actually gaining a little bit on Tiz the Law late. Now, granted, Tiz the Law wasn't all out, and I don't think he's going to beat Tiz the Law, but at 30 to 1 on the morning line, I think he's definitely one that you could use in those 2, 3, 4 slots, especially if Honor AP doesn't run his race. And the other one I really like, and frankly, I wouldn't want to have to make a morning line for the Kentucky Derby. It's got to be a very tough thing, but I don't think there's any way in the world attachment rate's going to be 50 to 1. You'll be lucky if he's half of that. But he's a horse I actually think is moving in the right direction. I don't think he's had great trips of late. I think he's going to like this distance. If you like Dart Collector, he ran very well against him last time. He had some big trouble in the time before that when he was beaten by him by 8 lengths. So he's a horse I'm definitely going to be keying in tries and supers, hoping to get in at a big price. I mean, don't get me wrong, he's not going to be 10 to 1 or anything like that, but I do think the 50 to 1's a bit of a pipe dream.
Yeah, he feels more like a 20 to 1 shot. Once you get past those top couple who people are going to think are the win contenders, everybody else sort of looks the same, and he's a horse who seems like he's progressing right now, whereas a lot of others might have sort of hit their peak. We might know who they are at this point of the year. He can still continue to take steps forward, which I don't think many in this field will do in this spot, because it feels like with their body of work being later in the year, we know this group. We know them pretty well. We've seen for the most part who they are. I feel like attachment rate still has a ceiling that's another step or two he can get to. And yeah, I'm completely fine with using him in underneath spots in 2, 3, 4 spots and in a lot of exotics as a 20, 25 to 1 shot type horse. Just not a field of 20 this year. We are not going to have the same sort of Kentucky Derby, but I will say this, Craig, in a year where many sports canceled, many sports had to completely restructure the way their sport goes, horse racing, for the most part, held pretty steady. There was some times where a couple tracks had to shut down. There were some schedules that got changed, in particular this Triple Crown schedule here. But hey, we have a really good Friday and Saturday where Tis the Law is a nice horse. We have a couple really nice fillies in the Oaks, and the undercards on both days are stacked just like any other Oaks or Derby weekend would. We see a bunch of stars. We have some big fields with some really good betting interest. So, hey, you know what? Maybe a chalky Derby, maybe a chalky Oaks, but the overall picture of the Friday and Saturday still look pretty damn good to me.
Yeah, I totally agree. And some of these races, I've got to the point in life where every race doesn't have to be a bet for me. I am a fan of the sport in addition to the betting, and I can watch the Oaks and the Derby and not make a bet, and I'm just fascinated by the matchups and how the races play out. Now I will bet them because I do have some opinions, as I said on here, but, there are some races where I don't have to bet. I can just watch and enjoy the sport for what it is, and I think we're going to get a lot of those on this weekend, as you said, on Friday and Saturday. Just some really big horses. I haven't looked totally over the Oaks card, but I think I saw Monomoy Girls there.
You got Shearing. You got the two
Shearing
nice
coming back from Ascot.
Monday Call and Four Graces are both in there too. A couple of nice fillies that aren't didn't really want to go quite that far. And then you got the Ali Sheba with McKinsey and By My Standards and Owendale and sort of that next tier right below the top older horses. It's a fun couple days we're in a sport where there aren't a lot of stars, but as far as as many big names as possible, we're going to see them this weekend out on Friday and Saturday. Craig, awesome stuff as always. I really, really appreciate you taking time because I know it's a busy week and we're all doing a bunch of these. So thank you for carving out a little time here, and let the folks out there know what other stuff can we see from you and what can we look from you for this weekend in the next few days.
David Aragona and I put out a podcast on Tuesday. We did touch on the Derby and the Oaks. We're not doing a full one this year, but on Friday. We usually do the Friday forecast, but we have a Timeform US Derby package that's available. You can find it at timeformus.com or drf.com, either of those places if you're interested. I'm always on Twitter giving my thought on the races. As Gino mentioned earlier, you do got to put up with my sports takes. So if you don't want to hear those, then follow Timeform US and not me, who is Timeform US Figs. But they'll usually retweet anything horse racing that I say. So, it's one of those weekends where despite all the sports being back, this is one I'll definitely have all of my focus on horse racing for the most part.
Yep, I'm going to be in the same boat too. It worked out. It's funny. The two of us probably had different feelings about the way the week led up. I was just telling Stephanie when early in the week on Monday night, I was saying, just please, I hope this goes to Game 7, because then it'll make my next few days trying to get my work done a little bit easier when I don't have to worry about a Laker game on Wednesday night, because I don't have to I can't really get my focus in when my team's playing. I'm so nervous. I'm watching them. So the way that worked out, I was able to at least get some stuff done. And I watched a great game between OKC and Houston. And one more time, and just a shout out to your team who had a really good year. Craig, thanks again, man. You're always one that I reach out to. Like I said, once it's a big day, I throw up the bat signal, and you're right there for me all the time, man. Thank you so much.
No problem. Say hi to Milo for me.
I will. You tell the family I said hello, and I look forward to talking to you again real soon.
All right. Thanks, Gino.
Folks, don't go anywhere. Let's take a quick break on That's What G Said. Plenty more racing ahead. One of the sponsors of That's What G Said podcast is Cindy Carava, full-service realtor, and I am here over in Glendora at Coldwell Banker with Cindy Carava. Cindy, how was 2019 for you? Tell us a little bit about what kind of stuff you were working on.
Hi, Gino. Thanks for having me. 2019 was just really great. I had a great year selling homes all the way from Altadena, Arcadia, Monrovia, out to Upland and Ontario just recently. The market has been really good. We're looking forward to 2020 with an increase in home prices about 5.8% this year, opposed to last year where it was a little softer. We saw more like homes averaging about 3.5% in increase in value. It's also looking great for buyers. The interest rates right now are going to be staying under 4%. So if you've been on the fence about thinking about buying a home, now is the time to do so with interest rates still staying low.
And you offer more services than just the buying, selling, and leasing homes. Tell us about some of the other services that you offer and what a full service realtor really is.
So you're right, Gino. Besides me being a full-service realtor of finding properties for my clients to buy or selling their homes or finding rentals for them, I also have a plethora of resources like handyman, contractors, electricians, plumbers. I even, if like I said, if you're thinking about getting a home loan, I actually work with 2 great lenders that I can recommend to anybody.
And you're all over the internet, social media, websites. Let us know some of the places where we can find you. I know I've seen some reviews on Yelp and on Zillow. Everyone always has positive things to say. Everybody hears me raving about you all the time. But where can everyone else find out information about you or contact?
Thank you, Gino. Yeah, I am on Facebook and Instagram and LinkedIn. And you can contact me on my website, which is www.cindycarava.com, or my email, which is cindyc.realtor@gmail.com, or feel free to call or text me on my cell phone, which is 626-394-6400.
Cindy is awesome. She's one of the kindest and most genuine people I've ever met. I promise you, you will enjoy every minute you interact with her. So thank you very much, Cindy. Appreciate all of your support from That's What She Said podcast.
Thank you, Gino. Have a great day, everyone.
Derby extravaganza rolls on. It's the cleanup hitter now. We are into some of the big races leading right up to the Derby. And joining me, one of my favorite people to talk horse racing with from Optics EQ, Emily Gullikson. Emily, how you doing on this busy week?
I'm doing great. Yeah, it's a busy week, but it's a fun week, right? Wouldn't have it any other way.
No, and you know, it's obviously a different year. We're in September and we're talking about the Oaks and the Derby and all that stuff this week. But even if it looks like those 2 races in particular may end up a little bit formful, we still have a ton on the undercards on both days. Don't disappoint. There's a combination of big names, big stars, and then a lot of other races that are just wide open where you can catch some prices. So really good combination of everything over the 2 days.
Yeah, I agree completely. You know, I wouldn't say disappointed. You're never disappointed when it's big days, right? But sometimes from like a playing standpoint, when you're like, oh, it's formful, or you have small fields, or like you have favorites that just look like complete layups, it makes it a little bit less exciting, you know, for players like you and I. And going through this card, you know, I did full card selections for Oaks and Derby over at Brisnet. And both days are just like, they're killer. Like there's so many races. I'm glad we're actually talking the races that we are because I have some really strong opinions against some favorites that I think are going to be big favorites and they're going to be short price favorites. And I just think that continues throughout the 2 days. So there'll be some real opportunities out there for players.
So those of you who are following along, get your past performances out. We are into race number 11 at Churchill on Saturday. We are on September the 5th, and this is Derby Day undercard leading right up to race number 14, which is the Kentucky Derby. So in race number 11, we're going to go a mile on the turf course in here, and any race that she's in, you have to really start the conversation with newspaper of record because she's a very polarizing filly. She's a super talented filly, and she showed last time that she can actually win on a turf course that's not yielding, which was a little check mark off the boxes for her on her resume. And she's the type that she's kind of old school, Emily. We don't see a lot like her in that. They've really figured out she doesn't really want to rate. She just wants to go. And in races she's in, she creates a lot of separation and she runs a lot of other horses off their feet. How do you think she stacks up in here, and what does it look like from optics and from your opinion from a pace standpoint?
Yeah, I mean, I just kind of right away going into this race, just like my mouth is watering because I think she's vulnerable in this spot for a lot of those reasons. I mean, yeah, in terms of, I want to kind of make one note real quick, just in terms of the adjusted game. I know that the course is listed as firm that day, but John Doyle, who does the trip notes over at Optics, he noted that turf course, even though that it was rated firm, was closer to good soft than firm. So I know that the PPs, the standard PPs aren't going to say that, but just, something to keep note. But in terms of her being vulnerable, it does come from a pace standpoint. And then just in terms of speed figures, I mean, she's not like she's that much faster than anyone else. So
Nope.
For her, the way that she wins is she gets her trip on the front end, and she's going to have pressure here. She's really quick in that first quarter, and then she slows things down. And that's where she wins race. But this pace is going to be a lot more contentious. I mean, a horse like Harmless is going to go. I don't know if she's not naturally as fast as Newspaper of Record, but they have no other choice. They're going to have to just put, their foot on the gas and just go. That's all there is to it. And then in terms of, the outside horse, Bella, we're going to go with Bella Laura. I know she's a little bit tricky looking at the PPs, but if you key off that June 7th race, or she had an outside post, which is similar to today, they had to go. They had to send to put her in the race. Last time out, she had the inside post. You can be a little bit more crafty in terms of trip. So from her being on the outside, if they're in this race to have any chance, they have to go. So she's going to have pressure from those two horses. And then Juliet Foxtrot has legit tactical speed, and she can finish, and she has class, and she's faster than Newspaper of Record. And she's a better price. So, all those things to me, I just think this race is going to be, I think there's other ways to go. But in terms of a pace standpoint, if we're talking about Newspaper of Record, she's going to be a big favorite. And I don't think that she has to win, and you can definitely try to beat her.
Yeah, you mentioned Juliet Foxtrot, who she looks like one that is sitting on a really big race, and she's coming into this race nicely. She should get a good trip for some of the reasons you mentioned, probably third, right behind maybe Newspaper of Record and Harmless, and she could get a jump on some of the deeper closers in here, like a Beau Recall, or maybe if she's on the Warpath, her daddy is a legend. So
yeah, I should have mentioned she's on the Warpath, because that's another one that's got to be forwardly placed. Right?
Yeah, especially from the inside, you would think that they're going to get away and have to. You don't have to gun it as much going longer, but you got to be using yourself a little bit early, and that will at least make it a little more difficult on Newspaper of Record. So what do we do with Daddy's a Legend, who just she threw in a real clunker in the comeback race? She had an excuse. She was wide legitimately. The only thing that bothers me is that she's had races before where she's come back and she's run much better than that. It's always just you look at a race that's that bad and it's hard, but that'll probably inflate her price a little bit.
Right. And, I don't mind that race at all for a couple reasons. One, she has a barn change. So I know in the past she's run well off a layoff, but it's different when you have, when you have a trainer change. Trainers do different things. They have different things in mind. The turf course that day at Ellis Park was really loose. Drew put her right into the race, so she's wide. She's up close to a pace. That's not a trip that she's used to. So
it's
in my
mind, it's not a winning
mind,
trip on turf either. It's
correct,
not. That's like
right.
A dirt trip that you can work out where you're wide all the way. That just never works on the grass like that.
Right. So that to me is just like, anyways, that just looked like all around like the type of a prep race for her, right? Because she was a graded stakes horse, so they're not trying to come back and win $100,000 race. A horse like she's on the Warpath. She's not quite a graded stakes filly. They're trying to win $100,000 race, right? Like they're in it to win it that day. Here it's like they'd like to, do their best. If they get a piece, great. She freaks and runs a big race, like even better. But for Daddy is a Legend, like they have to be looking at this type of race for her. And I think that start last time out, just kind of getting some conditioning, getting a race off the bench. And then the fact that, you mentioned, it's a poor effort, but it's a poor effort. She goes right into a graded stakes race. It's like she's running this race before. So this is a spot I expect her to run a much better race. She's kind of a total use for me. I'm pretty heavy, kind of 3-2. And then as far as Beau Recall, there's a couple others. Beau Recall, I've just been really disappointed with her this year. I thought the Mint Julep would have been kind of a kickoff point, could make a little bit of excuse in terms of trip. I thought it was a little bit sneakier than it looks on paper. And again, she did kind of move forward in some ways in the Just a Game. but just speed figure wise is just not getting back on track of the races that she was running in 2019. And that bothers me when there is a 6-year-old, right? Because it's like she should at least be running back to those numbers. And the fact that she hasn't, she's honest enough, I can say, to use her and, underneath 100%. But that's just one thing that just kind of concerns me. La Signere, she is another one that I think it fits in this race as well. Just kind of improving coming into this race. She was against the flow in the Grade 1 Jenny Wiley, likes this course. So I could see some upside there. But I think my biggest opinion in this race is just to try to play against, newspaper of record.
I'm doing the same thing. And I think you mentioned the horses, those next tier of horses to play. And I'm right there with you. It's the 3 Juliet Foxtrot, and I'll probably play some exotics, right? Like single, and really try to key around her. I think she's just sitting on a big one and going to be in a great spot. And Daddy is a Legend to me is going to absolutely be a use. And then, almost exactly what you said with Beau Recall. Is she capable of winning this race? Absolutely. Sure. She can jump up and win it again. She won this race last year. She just doesn't seem to be as good as she was last year. She just is like a little bit below. She's been against, she hasn't been in races where they've shaped up that great for her, but she still should have run a little bit better. I just wanted to see a little bit more from her. So yeah, I'm with you. Let's get Juliet Foxtrot home in race number 11. And let's see if we can beat newspaper of record right off the bat in that 11th race and some of the exotics. So we move on to race number 12, which is the Derby City Distaff. And we have kind of a preview for the Kentucky Derby in that the 3 horses in this race that at least are going to take all the money are drawn to the outside in here in Serengeti Empress, Bellafina, and Cece. And Serengeti Empress and Bellafina raced against each other in the Ballerina, and I'm not sure where exactly you stood on that one, but I remember immediately thinking, wow, I can't believe Bellafina didn't go by. It just felt like with the trip that Serengeti Empress got, she broke a little slow from the inside. Bellafina was sitting a perfect trip, but that's just kind of who she is. She didn't run poorly at all. She just looked like she was going to go by. She was getting a great trip, and she just could not. Maybe a combination of her hanging, Serengeti Empress digging deep. So where do you stand with that race? I think we kind of have to talk about it to begin with, because those two are going to take a lot of money, and that's sort of a key race when you're handicapping this one.
Right. So, again, I feel like I'm like striking on these favorites, but Serengeti Empress to me also looks vulnerable in this spot. I think a lot of people were really like blown away by that effort last out, and it was good, right? She was pushed out of the gate, but she really had to work throughout that race. And so when you have a horse, she's going to come back on 28 days rest. So there's just not a lot of recovery. She tends to need a little bit more time between her races if you just kind of like isolate where she kind of runs her big figures. So I feel like that's a negative for her. It's not like she's going to get an easy lead in here. She's drawn outside again. So, they've got to use to some extent. In terms of Bellafina, I mean, she's, you kind of just don't know what you get with her, right? Like she got a perfect trip, winning the Desert Stormer. This is a grade 3 race. A little bit scared, at Los Alamitos, if anything there. But yeah, again, no excuse. I mean, she's honest enough, but again, it's tough to get excited about her when there's just other ways to go in this field, especially when you just don't really have any edge with her, right? It's not like she's faster. It's not like she's going to get pace set up. It's like you have an honest filly, which is fine, but I don't know, it just doesn't really get you too excited.
Nope. So what do we do? What do we do with Cece to the outside here, who's turning back now from a couple races going longer, mile and a 16th? She hadn't raced for a few months. Got the Del Mar race under her belt. She gets away from Fighting Mad, who has gotten really good. Fighting Mad has won 3 of the last 4, and when Fighting Mad gets out front, you can make an excuse for Cece when a filly's out front kind of just cruising like that. It's tough to catch one. So where do we stand on her in this tier with the other top 2?
Yeah, I mean, I think she's legit in this spot. She has the race around she has a couple races around one turn, so it's not like she needs that extra ground to run her race. She's run just as fast. Her comeback race this year was really a prep. I mean, she wasn't asked for her best, so I know that figure's a little bit soft, but just keep those factors in mind. She's a multiple grade 1 winner. She was impressive in the Beholder Mile. and just as good in the Apple Blossom. And I think both those races are important to keep in mind because she just did not look quite fully recovered from those two efforts coming back in the Santa Maria. And then I just think, between the layoff and the way the race shape came into place, it wasn't a bad effort for Cece last time out. It was wide. She should get plenty of fitness. She looks really solid in here, and she knows how to win races.
Yeah, I like where she's drawn towards the outside. Yep. She can just kind of stalk. I don't mind if she goes a little bit wider in a race like this, turning back. I just want her to sort of stay in the clear and be able to pick and choose when she wants to go. She to me, she's the one that I'm going to use on top, and I'm going to build a lot around. And so we've talked about the main contenders. I mean, we have to at least mention Mia Mischief, who she's capable of really, really big efforts. I think I was just really disappointed with her two-back effort in the winning colors when she loomed up. And she raced really, really well against Guarana last time out, and she looked like she was the winner before Guarana ends up battling back. I just don't like her draw. She's much better, I think, when she's towards the outside. Down on the inside, she might get forced a little bit, and I don't know if she's going to be able to get the kind of trip she would need.
So a couple things. One, I kind of like her that she's drawn inside. It seems like when she's outside, she has to kind of get forced into the race. And just with the speed drawn, to her outside, she has tactical speed, but she could probably just save ground and sit right behind. And then in terms of the winning colors, here's something you're probably not going to see on PPs. Maybe if you follow me on Twitter, because I tweeted this out afterwards. But after the carousel, she took this really weird step, not in the race, but leaving the paddock. And it was just one of those that are coming back to the winner's circle and just was favoring her right front. And it was one of those where I just I took note of, not anything that was severe, but just, to keep in mind. Right. And so maybe that had something to do with the effort. And then again, the layoff here. So I think coming in fresh, I think the inside post, I think she's going to fire a big race. Trip will be key as far as her saving ground, but she should be able to sit behind that kind of first flight of speed horses. And again, maybe saving ground is the key with her.
There's a couple horses that are sort of pace dependent. It looks like Belle's the one, and Sally's Curlin could be horses that would be late on the scene if things got really crazy up front early. Do you like either one of them or anyone else in here that's sort of a price to include?
Yeah, I'm going to use Belle's the one. She is a closer, but she's not as much as of a confirmed one run closer. Sally's Curlin needs. She's got one run. Right? She has no early speed. Mm-hmm. She's just going to be way out of it and at the mercy of the race shape. Belle's the one can show a little middle move and put herself in the race, and I think that's kind of the key with her. She's run well over this track. She's not completely pace dependent, and I think with some of these horses, that are going to need the lead, and they are going to go fast. I think that'll kind of help Belle's the one to kind of put herself in the race and kind of get that first run, and then she can finish and come home quick. So I like her in this spot. So again, just using some other horses, but kind of that main opinion is being against Serengeti Empress.
Yeah, especially when it's nice to be able to use a few when you're going to chuck some of the short price favorites out. And yeah, she's one of those that's, as gamblers, they're just some horses that we generally, for me, I always find that I'm very rarely using her. It's I'm usually trying to take a stand against her. There are some spots where she just looks really tough, but in this particular case, I didn't love that last effort that much either. And I do have to mention, for those of you out there who are not following Emily on Twitter, she bats a really good percentage when you mention things like that after the race. When you say something like maybe a little ouchie or there's something like that, keep an eye, because generally those horses don't really come back and run well. Sometimes they don't even come back and run for a while. Sometimes
I can think of a few, yeah.
Yeah, sometimes just what you said, we don't see them for a few months because they just, they were a little something. So you definitely have a keen eye for things even that happen after the race. So a really good little tip.
I've been an athlete and I've had many ouchies, so I know what to look
for. there we go. We move into race number 13, the Turf Classic, mile and an eighth in here. And as many of these turf races go, Chad Brown will have a big hand in here with Rock Emperor, Digital Age, and Sacred Life. It looks like there should, at least on paper, be a pretty honest pace, which we don't see a lot of the times in New York in some places with these distance grass races. But with Factor This from the inside, and then with Some Like It Hot Brown and Spectacular Gem, they all seem to want to be really close to it early on. So we should get an honest race in here and some pace and some opportunities for horses to move into it.
Yeah, that's kind of the way I saw this race as well from like a pace standpoint. I had a really hard time with this race just in terms of, trying to find a horse that I either liked or disliked. So I'm kind of going to go from a pace standpoint with, I agree with your assessment in terms of Factor This is going to just go to the front from the inside. And then the two outside horses, that's their game as well. They've got to kind of go from that position. None of them really have much in terms of finish. So all three of them kind of taking up that role should set horses up from off the pace. If I have to kind of put them in order, I'm going to give an edge to Digital Age. I know it's a little bit sneaky. I know he's not the most obvious, of the Chad Brown horses because he's come back in the allowance races, but I think that's kind of a good foundation for him. He's run well in graded stake races in the past. He won the American Turf. It's a grade 2 over this course. Belmont Derby was a really good fourth. He just was like up against it that entire race against the Flow and the Hill Prince, and then a better than looked fourth place finish in the Hollywood Derby, a grade 1 race as well. So there's some class there, and I just think in terms of value, I'll try him. I mean, Rock Emperor. I thought his race at Santa Anita and the Whittingham was like so much bad luck at once. Like he was probably the best, and then he finished second, and then he got disqualified. It was just like the worst scenario, which looked to kind of set him up in Manhattan, and then just didn't look like you have any excuse in there. So as much as I think that this horse can win, it's like, oh God, just can't trust him at this point. And I kind of feel the same way about Bowie's Hero. I thought he was just, a really solid kind of horse in the Eddie Reed kind of second off at the right trip. And then, really no excuse. I mean, just a favorable pocket trip and came up short, but he's hard to toss. Of the maker horses, Mr. Dumas kind of gets the push for me of the two, just because he has a little bit of class to himself. He's run, he has a graded stake win over this course. He's running some graded stake races as well. He can stalk and finish in terms of trip. True Valor also has some class. I've always kind of thought of him more as a miler. So it'll be interesting, what kind of Graham Motion does. That's just like my one kind of concern with him. Sacred Life, I just was a little bit soft on him overall. Maybe you can convince me otherwise to land that way. But again, I had a hard time kind of being like for or against a horse in here and just kind of spreading with those horses that have finish. Yeah,
for some of the same reason that you use Digital Age, I throw in Sacred Life and sort of lean that way, just because this isn't a grade 1. This is a contentious group, but this isn't a grade 1. These are grade 2 type horses. You just look up and down, and it's not really that. So a Digital Age absolutely could jump up and win a race like this, and is in really nice form and has run over this track. This is sort of a spread out race for me, and I think a lot of the horses that you mentioned will be on mine. I'm going to steer clear of most of the speeds because I do think it's going to set up, and I'm going to be using basically Mr. Dumas, Digital Age, Sacred Life. I'll probably throw Rock Emperor in. I don't really like to use short prices defensively, but I don't think he's going to be that short. And there's going to be other races in the, if I'm playing pick 4s and pick 5s, sort of like you, where I don't like shorter prices. So I don't mind using him. I don't want to get to this race after beating Serengeti in a couple short prices and just not have him on a ticket and get knocked out. So I'll probably end up throwing him here in some way. But yeah, I'm not the strongest opinion in the world in this way. True Valor will also be on some of my tickets too. So I think we see this race pretty similarly, how it's going to shape up, but not really know who in particular is going to get the trip. I feel like it's probably one of those 4 or 5 that we mentioned.
Yeah, it'll be one like when you're playing live, if you want to make a win bet, I mean, there's probably just going to be some value, right? Because you could go a lot of different ways. So it's tough, in the position that we're in right now. And sometimes all of a sudden it's like you see a tote board and you're like, okay, this is the play. Like, just done.
Whoever gets forgotten out of this race, this is definitely one of those watch play individually, because somebody's going to get, somebody gets bet and then somebody floats up and they're double the price they should be. And then that's win or lose, that's the horse you have to play in an evenly matched group like this.
Right.
Yep. Okay, let's move into the Derby. So we've got some news over the last few days. Art Collector, who win, lose, if you liked him or not, was going to take a lot of money. Probably would have been the second choice in the field. And now it looks like King Guillermo is having some issues, and I'd imagine he probably won't run. As of when we're recording, they've said they're going to find out more information. We're recording this early Thursday. So it's never good, especially for a horse who hasn't run in a long time to begin with. So he may not be in the race. No Art Collector now. And we're going to see Emily Tis the Law as one of the shorter Derby favorites in history, and definitely in recent history. And it's really hard to knock him. It really is. He has done a lot of things right, and I can understand anyone who wants to bet against him. I will have tickets with him, against him, in combinations of things. But he, just from a good horse, he's been a really good horse. He's done so little wrong. And think about all the horses that have come and gone since he was good last year at 2, and how all those horses who were good at 2 have come back and not been good at 3. And then the Nadal, the Charlatan, Maxfield, who would have been that next tier. And he's just sustained his consistency and improved all throughout.
Yeah, agree. I mean, I think if you're going into this race, you have to just kind of look at him as the horse to beat. I'll give you some reasons why he can be beat, because I think it's possible. Obviously, if you're just looking like, kind of traditional, right, handicapping wise, like class and speed figures, he checks those boxes, right? He's been proven at the level. You mentioned all the reasons, like he's just been able to sustain and improve. Distance wise, that was maybe a question early on. He's passed that test. But here's a couple things to kind of keep in mind. And this is just not necessarily something you're going to see in the PPs, but it's there as well. The biggest one to me is just in terms of time between starts. And so this is going to be the first time in his career that he's going to run back in less than 30 days. And that is very important in terms of a horse's form cycle, their ability to recover between races. And again, you have a favorite. He's going to be a short price. He's going to be a super short price because it's the Derby and it's public money, and, it's going to be, underlay type scenario. And so you have that factor, right? The other thing is too is, partner at Optics, John Duel, he brought up going into the Travers before they even ran that race, a really good point about the race at 10 furlongs, is probably not the best prep race. And I know that's kind of counterintuitive because we think like, why wouldn't it be? Then he knows he can get the distance. But sometimes with these horses, and I know, he was geared down late and like people will say, oh, it's very easy. But if a horse runs hard for 9 furlongs and then they're going easy for 10, that 9 furlongs still matters, right? And so he's, it's a close to perfect trip, but he's kind of wide outside of horses. He's got to be up close to a pace that day. So is there something that could be taken out of him from that race? Absolutely. Sure. And again, you combine that with the fact that he's had less than 30 days rest for the first time in his career. And then also, you kind of go into the trips, right? He's been able to get really favorable trips. And a lot of that is just because good horses get good trips, right? We've heard that many times over. But this is going to be kind of a different scenario. And I think, some of these horses coming out maybe makes things a little bit easier for him. But from the outside post, they're going to want to be in the clear. He likes to be, within a couple lengths off the lead. We're going to have, in my opinion, and maybe things change with Guillermo coming out because he's one that kind of seemed like he'd have to be forwardly placed, all things considered, to have a chance. But this pace looks to be contentious, right? There's horses that are quick that want to be forwardly placed. And if he wants to be in that mix, it might be a scenario too where he's running faster early than he's had to run in the past. Mm-hmm. So that's another unknown that he hasn't taken. So while I can sit here and say, yes, all those factors kind of make him the horse to beat, when it comes down to it, they're still going to have to run and he's still going to have to win. And those are the factors that I think that could see him getting beat on Saturday.
And now with, there are going to be some juicy numbers up on the board for horses if you want to take some swings. And I will, absolutely have some exotic tickets lined up to to some bombs in here. Let's kind of go through little clumps of horses in here, and we can give some quick thoughts on each one and just kind of go inside out. So let's start with the inside three horses. They're big prices on the board. We have a 50-1 shot with Finnick the Fierce, and then we have Max Player and Enforceable, who feel like horses that are a little more buzzy that people will want to use underneath because of their running styles. They're not distance limited. With these three, how do you feel? Who are you hot or cold on?
I would go in the order of 3, 2, 1. I can see Enforceable winning the race. Just the one concern with me is trip for him, right? Because deep closers, they struggle in this race. And that's pretty much it. But I mean, in terms of, he has class, he has speed figures to compete. Max Player to me maybe is just a little bit more of a good underneath use. I have a hard time kind of getting there in terms of the win end, where I could see it with Enforceable. We've been pointing to this race. He's got, a lot of foundation under him, those types of things. Good race over this course. So yeah, that's kind of where I would go in that inside flight would be like 3, 2, 1.
And we'll go to the next flight where we have the 2-year-old champ storm the course. Isn't it funny to think that he's the 2-year-old champ over Tiz the Law, when we look back, because of the one race that Tiz the Law had a little bit of a hiccup. And he has a couple races this year that aren't bad. He just hasn't shown any improvement. The Ohio Derby was a race that he absolutely was supposed to win. He ran decent on the grass, but they take a big shot in here with him because he has the points, and this isn't even going to be a full starting gate. But we have Storm the Court as a 50-1 shot right next door to a 50-1 shot Major Fed. It's going to be hard to if King Guillermo's in there, you mentioned he'll probably push the pace. And then Money Moves is the lightly raced one for Pletcher. Let's talk about this group.
Yeah, Storm the Court to me, I mean, he looks like just like a grade 3 caliber type horse. So just in terms of class, he's a little bit below. Major Fed, he's on a little bit on the slower side, maybe improving type. Distance wise, should not be any issue for him. Definitely one to use underneath. I don't think he's quite there in terms of a win candidate, but would want him, in those deeper tickets. I'm not into King Guillermo. I understand he's a good horse. He has a lot of talent. I don't even mind the layoff, to be honest. I know people are negative on that, but this is so different when you have a layoff with horses that are older 3-year-olds versus horses that are younger 3-year-olds. It's a world of difference. So that doesn't bother me as much as the distance and just his run style. I just have a hard time seeing this type of distance for him and him getting the trip. But that might not even matter. Money Moves. I just think this is a big test. I mean, I don't think the field that he beat last time out was anything special. I know it was older horses, or not even that he beat, that he finished second. It was, I guess, a tight finish there. But it wasn't that great.
I know it locally. I have a problem when I look at that race too, because locally owned is just a nice allowance horse. The horse who was right behind him, and I can see him continuing to improve. And this isn't the strongest, like we said, it's not the strongest group in the world. So he'll be underneath for me because nothing would shock me really underneath. But there are just some horses that I don't know if I could see them beating this whole group. He would really have to get things his way, and some others would have to regress, at least in my opinion. As we move to a couple other bombs, it's just crazy. The prices all strung together in a row here. We get to South Bend, who's 50-1, Mr. Big News, who's 50-1. And then 1,000 Words is 15. Necker Island is 50. Let's go through this group of 4 that includes 3 50-1 shots.
Yeah, I'll just kind of give a group pass on the 50-1 shots. Yeah. I mean, again, if you're spreading underneath, sure. As far as 1,000 Words, I think he can win this race. I saw a big change in him in the morning leading up to the Los Alamitos Derby. I was really watching his workouts, trying to see what kind of horse. I mean, we've seen with these Baffer horses, sometimes when they show a massive ability at 2, and then all of a sudden they just can't repeat and they just completely fall off. So, watching him from the point of is that what happened to this horse? It is just, the stumble at the start, just took him completely out of running, is just not interested. And I saw him wake up in the morning, And the work that woke him up is when they put him out in front of horses. And as soon as they did that, I'm like, all right, that's the key, is they need to put this horse on the front end. Once he gets out in front of horses, he's going to run his race. Otherwise, who knows? And he broke slow in the Los Alamitos Derby, and they were just, Pratt was just a little bit kind of hesitant because Uncle Chuck was in the race and Uncle Chuck wired the field, but he still gave a good second. And then in the shared belief, I'm like, they gotta go. Like they're thinking wire this field, like they're gonna go to the front, and they did. And that's the type of race that, again, if the 6 comes out, I think Giroux is a good fit. I mean, he's not afraid to steal a race, and I think if they do, maybe he's not good enough, whatever. But I think that would give him his best chance to compete this afternoon. And so I have to leave him in the mix for that reason.
Yeah, because he's one we've talked about before, I think when we previewed races, he's so grindy, and he's always been that way, that those horses are really good on the front end because they just keep going. They're not going to be able to come from 5 to 8 to 10 lengths back and pass you most of the time because they just don't have that sort of turn of foot. But when they're able to just start cruising like he did up front, they were just really hard to pass. And he did. He's really perked up and changed. He looks like a different horse than he was towards the end of last year and early into this year.
Yeah. I just think there's a lot of positives. I mean, I know I'm going to kind of skip ahead here, but I think without any surprise, Honor AP is very logical, and I kind of think he's sort of the most likely in this race. Those reasons I mentioned in Tis the Law. So he's just kind of a must use for me.
Yeah, so let's get to some of these other bombs, and then we get to the major contenders on the outside too. Sol Volante was interesting because he was really consistent, and he ran a good race at Gulfstream in June in a race that may not have been exactly what he wanted, and then he comes back 10 days in the Belmont. He doesn't run really well, and so you could sell me on him. I could go either way on him, hitting the board and picking up pieces. Where do you stand with him? We have Attachment Rate, who's, has been a horse who had supposed to have potential for a while. He's never really won a big one, but he seems like he's at least improving. Winning Impression looks like he's going to be a very, very big log shot. Let's go with these 3.
Okay. I mean, as far as Sol Volante, I'm just, I'm not sold with him just in terms of class. I know he's a good horse. All that stuff, I think what happened in the Belmont is they were looking ahead to the Belmont and wanted to give him a race at Gulfstream Park, just to kind of set him up because he was coming off the layoff that day. And what happened was he just freaked and he ran too big of a race. Like he was keyed up. He was ready to run a big race.
He wasn't supposed to do that,
but he did it on the wrong day, right? And so they're like, "Oops!" All right, we got to try it. We got to try to regroup. So I think that's smart. I think he's a good horse, but again, I think he's a good horse. But I just have a hard time, putting him over others. And also in terms of trip, he's probably going to be well out of it. So he's got to kind of work through traffic and make a run from off the pace. So things are just a little bit difficult. Attachment Rate, I like this horse. I've just been watching him just kind of come forward. He's been able to mature. It's been a gradual, which is kind of what you want to see with these horses because it's later in the season. They're older 3-year-olds. You want to see that maturity. So saw that maturity coming back this year at Gulfstream Park. And this being his 3rd race of the form cycle, I thought the Bluegrass was a really sneaky effort because he showed a couple moves in there. He broke slow. He kind of moved early into the race to get position, and then he was kind of moving up late. And so it was just kind of one of those races that was a good comeback race for him. Wasn't a race he was going to win, but it was the type of race that could see him move forward, and he did. He moved forward at the Ellis Park Derby. Art Collector got the perfect trip. That was kind of his race that day. But Attachment Rate, he put himself in the race. He was wide. He was up close. And I like the way he finished. I thought he was still running to the wire. It wasn't like he was, just hanging on for second. He was still closing ground. Art Collector had to finish in order to stay in front of him. I like that race. And I just think in terms of trip, he could be the horse that kind of gets that trip because he's able to show those gears. He's able to, he doesn't need to have the lead, but he can put himself in the race. And then if the race, it is starting to fall apart late, we are starting to see a little bit of chaos. Could be just the right horse that's just going to kind of keep moving forward and just be in the right place at the right time. So he's a use for me. And, Winning Impression, I'll even throw in New York Traffic. They're just both kind of, they're just too below. New York Traffic, he ran really well last time out, but did have a bias in his favor, which is also, worth keeping in mind with Authentic. So yeah, just both those horses are not for me.
Okay, and then the outside three, we've already talked plenty about Tiz the Law, so let's go Honor AP and then Authentic, the two who have hooked up against each other on the West Coast a couple times. And for me, I'm a little bummed that there is no Art Collector in here, because I do think from just a pure win standpoint, if I was looking for one horse to play, it would probably be Honor AP. And I'm going to get a lot less of a price now because no Art Collector. So I have no issue with his race last time out. It was a short field. He didn't need to win that race. It was weird. He showed some multiple gears in that race too. He looked like he was done and then he came on again. But he's just not going to get that kind of trip. He doesn't want to be that close. He's going to just sit, take back a little bit more is what I'm expecting. And not back, but just a little bit more off the pace. I like him in this spot. I just wish I could get a little more of a price.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's kind of the key with him, right? Is he's a horse that, like, he doesn't need a particular trip to win. Mm-hmm. And sort of, going back to looking at as far as like where horses are supposed to win. I mean, they would have obviously been happy to win the Shared Belief Stakes, but their eyes are on the prize. Like, they're looking at the Kentucky Derby. They want to get a good race out of him. I think they got plenty out of that, where he was wide, he was able to get, show a little bit more tactical speed. I thought it was, a perfect race for him to come back in and to move forward in here. He doesn't look to have any distance limitations. He's a really classy individual. He's moving forward with each and every start. And I just, he's just so logical in here that it would be hard for me to see him not run a good race on Saturday.
Yeah, I agree. He'll be, if he's around 5-1, I'll probably play a few bucks to win on him, and he'll be in all my exotic tickets for sure, no doubt about it. What do we do with Authentic?
I imagine he would be, right? Because I just think, Tiz the Law is just going to be so much shorter than his boarding line, because, I mean, you just hear all the chatter and, like, it's the Derby, so you get a lot of extra attention, a lot of extra money. He's going to be so short. So I think a 5-1 second choice is probably not unrealistic.
Because that's not going to be too crazy to entice the people and say, oh, he's too big of a price. And there'll be people that are going to want to go fishing for the bigger ones, because after him, everybody else will be a much bigger price. Even a horse like Authentic, I'd imagine, who's going to be very close, but he's from way outside. He's no doubt about it. He's going to have to go. We've seen that he doesn't really want to sit, and he's not going to want to come from off the pace. So with him, he's got speed. We know 1,000 Words, the other Baffert, he's got speed. Where do you project him to be? Just gunning from the outside?
That's the only option they have. They have to go. I mean, he's not a horse that has shown any other dimension. And in the races, it's like he got like kind of the perfect trip in his debut. Baffert being live first time out with these type of horses. He was lone in his second start, green as all get out, and he still hasn't quite got over that. So that's a little concerning just in terms of class. He had another lone trip, and then he caught the bias in the Haskell. And going into the Santa Anita Derby, I made the case that he was going to be vulnerable that day from a pace standpoint because he's drawn on the outside, because he had speed in the inside. Distance-wise, he looks like he has some limitations. So I think if you're playing this race, which I'm sure we all are, for my opinion, he's a horse that's just is not going to be on the tickets in any of the spots, because the value's not going to be there, and he just has one way to go. And I just think there's 1,000 Words, I think has a similar running style and is going to be a better price, and I'm going to gamble that he's a better horse. So he's just not a use for me, and maybe that's foolish, but I mean, you got to take a stand somewhere, and that's kind of where I'm at.
Yeah, we can't go ABC, if we're playing exotics and stuff like that. It's not, and he just feels the most vulnerable of the horses that they're going to be in the shorter prices. He'll probably be the third choice, I'd imagine. And I'd much rather use the top two. I don't really have as much. You mentioned plenty. If you want to go in a different direction for Tiz the Law, plenty of things to at least pick at in a horse that's going to be very, very short. That's the key. When a horse is that short and you have a few things that you can at least ask a question or pick at, sure. And then we had plenty of others in here that maybe have some upside that we can use underneath. I'm not going to feel forced into using authentic in any exotics either. So for me, it's going to be a lot around Honor AP. It'll probably be a lot of exotics with Honor AP, Tis the Law, and then a good slew of the price horses that we mentioned.
Yeah, that's kind of my approach as well. I'm not fully against Tis the Law, but again, there's scenarios where I'll have some tickets with him either, running out or being very deep underneath. So, because why not, right?
Yeah. And like we said, in the sequence that we went through of the short price favorites, there are some, I like Tis the Law more than a couple of the others that might be in the sequence. So if we're playing the sequence like that, I'm probably not going to be chucking him completely out in that sense. Whereas, I'm fine, like I said, with throwing a Serengeti out, throwing a newspaper of record out, some horses that we talked about earlier in the sequence. So, Emily, awesome stuff like always. You had mentioned earlier that you have full card selections for Friday and Saturday. Let us know. I'm sure you have some footage out there, some content out there. You're probably doing a seminar or two or live stuff. Let us know what your next few days are like.
So the full card is up on Brisnet. I know it's a pricey $20 for each day. I wish it was free for everybody, to be honest, but that's just the way it goes. But again, I think that you're going to get your money's worth. It's a lot of content. I think each one is like 6,000 words. I'm not chalky. There's a lot of opinions in there. So I feel that it's good value, even though it is on the higher end. So I'm aware of that. We did a video, an early video on Optics EQ, talking about the Derby. This was last week, so things have changed a little bit, but a lot more kind of in depth as far as those horses. And then over at Optics EQ, we do our regular weekend special, so Friday, Saturday, Sunday, which will include the Derby, which will include some analysis for these races over the next couple days. And then, of course, just with any other package of optics, you get all the tracks too, plot and notes. So it's an awesome value for $50.
Really great stuff. You hear Emily, who uses a lot of those tools and makes a lot of that stuff, only those tools, and creates a lot of those things for Optics EQ. So Emily, thank you so much. Good luck this weekend. I will be going back and forth with you a little bit, and I wish you the best of luck.
Yes, thank you so much, and thanks for having me on. I appreciate it.
Folks, don't go anywhere. We'll be right back with a little bit more on That's What G Said. Thank you, Emily, for helping us out there. One more time, let's just kind of recap some of the horses I like in those races we talked about. So, yeah, all about Juliet Foxtrot in the 11th race. They're really high on Juliet. And then on some other tickets, it'll be Daddy's a Legend. Maybe I throw a Bull Recall on a ticket or two. And then, it all comes down to newspaper record. What do you want to do with her? I'm fine with leaving her out in race number 12. To me, I really like CC from the outside. It's CC. I definitely give a look to Bell's the One, as Emily spoke about. And then, Serengeti Empress and Bellafina, what are you going to do with those two? I'll probably throw Sally's Curl in on a ticket or so. Also, in race number 13, this is where I go with the 8, Sacred Life on top, but I will be spreading out a little bit in here at Sacred Life. I'll be using Mr. Dumas, Digital Age, Rock Emperor also be on the tickets too. So, 3, 8, 6, 3, 4, 7, True Valor also using some of the exotics. And then in the Derby, for me in the Derby, it's Honor AP is going to be my top selection. I will use Honor AP and Tis the Law, along with a ton of others. I'm a little higher on New York Traffic, maybe not winning, but in the mix. He just fights. He's always there. He should be sitting close throughout. I just hope he doesn't get hooked too wide. I don't know if he's good enough to win and beat some of the others. And if he doesn't have a couple length lead, he's not going to pass and be closing as well as some others late. But I just like the way he fights and battles. And then after that, it's a bunch of price horses underneath that I'm completely okay with using. Max Player, Enforceable, Money Moves underneath, maybe Sol Volante, and definitely Attachment Rate. So, Honor AP, Tiz, New York, Honor AP on top, Tiz, New York Traffic in a lot of the exotics along with Honor AP, and then the underneath horses would be Max Player, Enforceable, Money Moves, Sol Volante, Attachment Rate. And 1,000 words. Throw 1,000 words in the mix too, just because I like the fact that he's probably going to be just close and continuing to grind things out. So he would be another that I would use in some underneath exotics. Thank you for listening to this long, action-packed Derby preview. A big thank you to all of the guests. It started out talking NBA with Erik. We talked the first few races on Saturday with Barry. Then we went 4, 5, 6, 7 with Ryan. Then it was Craig Milkowski. And then to finish things off, it was Emily, and she helped us out going horse by horse in the Derby. A big thank you to everyone. Make sure to subscribe, rate, review. If you know some friends that are out there playing the Derby, playing the Oaks, they need a little help, let them know about the shows, pass them along. And coming up next week, the NFL season will start. We're going to be talking a lot of NFL here. If you're a football fan, if you're a fantasy football fan, if you are someone who bets the games, we're going to talk the lines, the spreads each week, where the movement is. We will have guests that come on and that give us some of their best bets and their plays. We'll continue to track how everything goes. And I'm someone who watches all the games on Game Pass, watches every play of every game. I'll recap them for you. I'll let you know what happened if you were only able to watch Red Zone and couldn't catch some of the games. So really looking forward to NFL starting next week. Joey Cleveland closed this out. Folks, good luck this weekend.